ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into the final part of the series, so be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Izumi's POV. UA High School's Hero Course isn't just any program, it's the program, the place where legends are born. Only 1 in 300 applicants make it in. Think about that. All those hopeful faces, and most of them go home disappointed. Not me, though. Not today. The school that produced All Might, yeah. The #1 hero who smiles in the face of danger and has saved more people than anyone can count. The school behind Endeavor, with its overwhelming flame quirk and second-place ranking that hasn't budged in years. And don't even get me started on Best Jeanist with his 8 consecutive Best Jeanist awards, honestly. Who names an award after themselves? It's like if I called my signature move the Best Izumi. Actually, that doesn't sound half bad. Seems like if you want your name in lights as a hero, you need UA on your resume. And today, I'm adding my name to that list. I finished training with Dad just a few days ago, February 26th, to be exact. 3 months of pushing one for all to new limits, discovering what else I could do with this quirk of mine. Dad kept saying I was barely scratching the surface, that my power goes beyond just controlling space. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with this strange look, like he was seeing someone else, like he knew something about me that I didn't. You're getting there, Izumi, he'd said during our last session, his eyes distant as he watched me manipulate the space between 2 trees, compressing it until they nearly touched. But remember, true strength isn't just about what you can do, it's about what you understand. Cryptic as always. That's Dad for you. He has this way of speaking that makes you feel like you're missing something obvious, like the punchline is right there but you can't quite see it. And then, in classic me fashion, I overslept on exam day. Real smooth, Izumi. 1 minute I was dreaming about floating through infinite space, so vivid I could almost feel myself drifting through endless blue, surrounded by stars that whispered secrets in a language I almost understood. There was someone else there, too, a silhouette with white hair and a blindfold, reaching out to me. His fingers were long and elegant, and something about him felt familiar, like looking in a mirror that showed a different version of myself. Just as our fingers were about to touch, my alarm blared. The next thing I knew, I was scrambling around my room, throwing on clothes and barely remembering to grab breakfast. My uniform was wrinkled from where I'd tossed it over my chair last night, and I stubbed my toe on a textbook I'd left on the floor. Mom was already gone for her early hospital shift, leaving a note wishing me luck next to a wrapped bento. "You'll be amazing, sweetie. Show them what you can do." Her handwriting was neat and precise, just like everything else she did. A surgeon's hands, Dad always said. Every stroke of her pen was as deliberate as her scalpel. I tucked the note into my pocket, a little charm for good luck, and ran my fingers over the folded paper, drawing strength from her confidence in me. The subway platform was a nightmare, packed shoulder to shoulder with morning commuters. Businessmen checking watches, students with earbuds in, everyone avoiding eye contact in that special way only city people can manage. The air smelled of coffee, perfume, and that particular metallic scent unique to underground trains. A train delay flashed on the board. 20 minutes. I checked my watch and felt my stomach drop. At this rate, I'd be cutting it close. Too close. But that's never been a problem for me. I simply took a shortcut, slipping into an empty maintenance corridor. I made sure no one was watching before activating my quirk. The familiar sensation washed over me, that pleasant warmth as reality bent to my will, like the world itself was putty in my hands. Goldenish orange light flickered at my fingertips, almost imperceptible unless you knew what to look for. The air around me vibrated slightly, humming with energy that made my skin tingle. 1 step, and I was halfway across the city, leaving a faint trace of burned flames in my wake. I glimpsed the tops of skyscrapers and felt the rush of wind through my hair as space compressed around me. Another step, and UA's gates appeared before me, imposing and grand, everything I'd imagined they would be. The metal gleamed in the morning sun. The school's emblem proudly displayed front and center. 45 seconds. That's all it took me to arrive at UA's massive gates for the practical exam. My hair was still a mess, green curls springing in every direction as I ran a hand through them. But I made it, leaving a few confused commuters back at the station, wondering where that green blur went. Some abilities are just too convenient not to use. Even if Dad keeps warning me about quirk dependency and how I shouldn't rely on pyroform for everything. You need to learn how to function without your powers. He lectured last week, his voice serious as he blocked one of my punches. What happens if you face someone who can nullify quirks? What then, Izumi? Coughs. He must be talking about Eraserhead. Like, come on, what are the odds of him being my teacher? And easy for him to say when he can blend into crowds without people knowing his actual form. The man literally changes his appearance at will, and then has the nerve to lecture me about not relying on my quirk? Classic dad logic. Third-person POV. I made it in time, Izumi exhaled, bracing her hands on her knees as she caught her breath, a faint trace of golden-orange light still sparking at her fingertips before fading away like embers from a dying fire. She straightened up, adjusting her outfit, a white cable-knit sweater over a maroon shirt that peeked out at the neckline. Her dark brown plaid skirt sat high on her waist, secured with a matching belt and rectangular buckle. The backpack slung over her shoulder contained just the essentials, some supplies and a change of clothes for the exam. She brushed a stray green curl behind her ear, noting how her hasty exit had left her hair more unruly than usual. Despite her best efforts, those curls always seemed to have a mind of their own, much like her father often teased. Izumi took in the sight of UA's massive entrance, the morning sun glinting off its polished surface. The imposing H-shaped building loomed against the clear blue sky, its windows reflecting the light like hundreds of watching eyes. Students streamed past her toward the examination hall, their faces a mix of determination and anxiety. Some walked in groups, nervously, comparing quirks and strategies, while others moved alone, lost in concentration. She felt her own stomach flutter with nerves, a peculiar sensation that seemed at odds with the calm confidence she usually projected. For a brief moment, a memory flashed through her mind, a sense of déjà vu, as if she'd stood before imposing gates like these in another life. Since I had 10 months to prepare myself for One for All, I should be able to handle a lower percentage of that quirk, she muttered to herself, tapping her chin thoughtfully as she began walking toward the entrance. Her mind raced through calculations and possibilities. The question is, how will OFA affect pyroform when I activate both simultaneously? Dad mentioned the energy output might increase exponentially, but the strain on my body could be significant unless I maintain proper control over the spatial distribution of. Her mumbling picked up speed and volume, drawing curious glances from nearby examinees who edged away from the green-haired girl talking intensely to herself. One boy with 6 arms actually took 3 steps sideways to avoid her path, exchanging concerned glances with a girl whose skin shimmered like mother of pearl. Izumi barely noticed, too caught up in her analysis. And if I managed to calibrate the wavelength output between the 2 energy sources, perhaps I could create a resonance effect that would amplify. Move aside, Usagi. A sharp, angry voice cut through her thoughts like a knife through butter. Izumi blinked, abruptly pulled from her mental calculations. She turned to see Katsuki Bakugo approaching, wearing Aldera Junior High's black Gakurin uniform with a light golden scarf wrapped around his neck, a gift from his mother, though he'd sooner blow up his own hands than admit it. His crimson eyes narrowed dangerously, blonde spikes seeming to bristle like an agitated animal's fur. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, but she could see small wisps of smoke escaping from between his fingers, betraying his tension. "Get out of my way or get dead," he growled, shoulders tense as he stalked toward the entrance, each footstep deliberate and heavy. The morning light cast sharp shadows across his face, emphasizing the permanent scowl etched into his features. Izumi straightened her posture, meeting his glare with practiced indifference. A smile played at the corner of her lips, not quite mocking, but certainly not intimidated. There was something almost playful in her eyes, a glint of amusement that only seemed to irritate him further. "Morning, Pomeranian," she replied coolly, stepping aside but maintaining eye contact. "Excited for the exam? Or just your usual ray of sunshine?" Bakugo's eye twitched at the nickname, a small explosion popping in his palm before he clenched his fist tight, smothering the sparks. A vein pulsed visibly at his temple. "TCH, stay out of my way." He shouldered past her roughly, the scent of nitroglycerin and caramel lingering in his wake. As Bakugo passed, she noticed two nearby students whispering, pointing discreetly at him. Their expressions were a mix of awe and wariness. "That's the kid from the sludge incident, right?" A tall boy with metallic skin murmured, his voice carrying the metallic timbre of his quirk. "Yeah, the one with the explosion." Quirk heard he was the only one who fought back. His companion replied, eyes following Bakugo's retreating form. "They say he was fighting so hard that even the pro heroes had trouble restraining him after." Watching Bakugo's retreating back, Izumi couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in his demeanor. His shoulders were slightly hunched, his steps less bouncy than they used to be. Ever since Izuku's disappearance, he's been more subdued than usual, she thought, tucking another curl behind her ear. And that's surprising for him, since he has a short temper of an atomic bomb. There's something almost haunted in his eyes now. She wondered briefly if guilt played a part in that haunted look, though Bakugo would rather die than admit to feeling remorse about anything. She squared her shoulders, confidence surging through her as she adjusted her backpack strap. The note from her mother crinkled in her pocket, a reminder of why she was here. The paper felt warm against her skin, almost like her mother's encouraging touch. "Thanks to Dad for all that training, I think I can become a real hero. No, I will become one." Her resolve hardened, crystallizing into something unbreakable at her core. Lost in thought, Izumi's foot caught on an uneven section of pavement. Time seemed to slow as she pitched forward, arms windmilling uselessly. The ground rushed up to meet her face at an alarming rate. Her enhanced reflexes should have caught this, but her distracted mind had momentarily dampened her natural grace. "Or I'll just die before I even make it to the exam," she thought with a comically resigned expression, bracing for impact with the concrete and the inevitable embarrassment that would follow. She could already imagine the headlines. "Future hero defeated by sidewalk." But the impact never came. Instead, a strange weightlessness took over her body, leaving her suspended in mid-air, legs still kicking at nothing. It felt similar to when astronauts are floating in zero gravity, a sensation both liberating and disorienting. Her stomach lurched slightly, unused to this particular flavor of weightlessness that wasn't of her own making. "Are you okay?" a gentle female voice asked beside her, tinged with concern and a hint of amusement. The voice was warm and bright, like sunshine in audio form. Izumi's eyes widened in panic as she flailed her arms, trying to find purchase in the empty air. The sensation of floating without her own quirk controlling it was disorienting, almost nauseating, a strange vulnerability for someone used to manipulating space itself. The girl who had spoken quickly reached out, grasping Izumi's arm to stabilize her floating form. Her touch was warm and reassuring, grounding in its simplicity. "Sorry about that. Let me release my quirk," the girl said, pressing her fingertips together with a soft release. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she concentrated. Gravity returned instantly, and Izumi's feet touched down on solid ground with a slight stumble. She turned to face her rescuer, taking in the girl's appearance with the keen observation skills her father had drilled into her. Her eyes cataloged details automatically, a habit that had become second nature. She was petite with a slender yet curvy figure, fair skin framed by auburn hair that matched her warm eyes. Perpetual pink adorned her cheeks, complementing large, round eyes with pronounced lashes thicker on top with two longer ones on each side, and fewer but more defined lashes on the bottom. Her hair barely reached her shoulders, styled in a bob with short bangs and two longer strands framing her face. There was something open and honest in her expression, a genuineness that was instantly appealing. She wore a pristine white long-sleeved sifuku with a dark blue kansai collar, cuffs, and skirt. The uniform featured double white trim on both cuffs and collar, paired with a red scarf tied neatly beneath. Black tights and brown outdoor school shoes completed her look, along with a cozy brown duffel coat and pink scarf to ward off the February chill. Despite the uniform's formality, there was something undeniably warm about her presence. "It's my quirk," the girl explained, placing her hands together with a gentle smile, eyes closing briefly in a way that reminded Izumi of a contented cat. Her fingers were slightly calloused, suggesting she wasn't afraid of hard work. "I can make things I touch lose their gravity. I'm sorry for using it without asking," but she glanced at the pavement with a small frown. "It's a bad omen to trip and fall on such an important day. I know this exam is super nerve-wracking." "Thank you," Izumi said, genuinely grateful as she brushed imaginary dust from her skirt. She felt a strange kinship with this girl who seemed so unpretentious and direct. That was a nice save. Tripping before the exam would have been embarrassing, not the first impression I was hoping to make. She extended her hand, her smile widening naturally. "May I know your name, please?" The girl's eyes widened. "Oh, where are my manners?" she said with a sheepish expression, a light blush deepening the pink on her cheeks. She took Izumi's offered hand in both of hers, her grip firm but gentle. There was a faint callus on her palm, confirming Izumi's earlier observation. "I'm Achiko Uraraka from Rosaria Middle School." She bowed politely toward Izumi, releasing her hand with a slight hesitation, as if reluctant to break the connection. "Izumi Yagi from Aldera Junior High School." Izumi responded with her own bow, the movement precise and elegant despite her earlier clumsiness. Something about Uraraka's straightforward kindness put her at ease in a way few strangers could. "Nice to meet you, Uraraka-san. I guess we should head in before we're both late?" "Yeah, I guess so," Uraraka said with a warm smile, adjusting the strap of her bag. "We should definitely head in. Don't want to be late on such an important day." She gave a little wave, her fingers wiggling in a friendly gesture. "Good luck on the exam, Yagi-san." "You too, Uraraka-san." Izumi returned the wave, watching as the bubbly girl merged into the stream of applicants heading toward the entrance. As Uraraka disappeared into the crowd, Izumi stood still for a moment, a strange feeling bubbling up in her chest. Her lips slowly curved into a wide smile, and she had to resist the urge to do a little victory dance right there on the pathway. "I just had an actual conversation with another girl," she thought, practically vibrating with excitement. "And she seemed to actually like me." The realization hit her with unexpected force. Back at Aldera, girls her age gave her a wide berth, whispering behind their hands whenever she passed. Some were intimidated by her tomboyish demeanor, even though she had a cute face. Others were put off by the rumors that circulated after the incidents with Izuku. Years of dealing with her brother's bullies had hardened her exterior, given her sharp edges that other girls found off-putting. She'd grown accustomed to spending lunchtimes alone, to partnering with teachers during group projects because no one would choose her. "Maybe UA really will be different," she mused, adjusting her hair clip with newfound determination. The possibility of making actual friends, not just acquaintances who tolerated her presence, sent a warm flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with pre-exam jitters. "But where is Izuku? He said in that letter that he'd be here for the exams." Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of her missing brother. The stream of applicants continued to flow toward the entrance, a kaleidoscope of different heights, builds, and likely quirks. Some walked with confident strides while others shuffled nervously, clutching at application papers or fidgeting with their clothes. Izumi stood on her tiptoes, trying to get a better view over the sea of heads. That's when she saw him, a figure that made her breath catch in her throat. It was like the mysterious guy from her dream had stepped right into reality, materializing among the UA applicants as if he'd always belonged there. He had snow-white hair that spiked upward dramatically, partially obscured by a black blindfold wrapped securely around his eyes. Despite being unable to see his gaze, she felt an inexplicable pull toward him. His face was striking, a narrow, aristocratic nose, a strong, square chin, high, chiseled cheekbones that caught the morning light. There was something familiar about those features that tugged at her memory, though she couldn't place why. He moved with casual confidence, seemingly unbothered by his inability to see if he truly couldn't see at all. He wore a faded black hoodie with a front kangaroo pocket, the fabric worn soft with age but still maintaining its shape. His loose-fitting, wide-leg jeans in a similar faded black wash hung perfectly from his hips, not too tight but not sloppy either. A sliver of a plain white t-shirt peeked out from under the hem of the hoodie, offering a stark contrast to the darker colors. His chunky white sneakers with subtle silver detailing completed the effortlessly cool look, each step deliberate but relaxed. A simple black backpack hung from one shoulder, bouncing slightly with each step as he walked past her and headed toward the entrance of the school. Despite the blindfold, he navigated the crowd with surprising ease, students unconsciously parting to let him through. Izumi's cheeks warmed as he passed within arm's reach, close enough that she caught the faint scent of something like mint and sandalwood. Her heart hammered against her ribs for reasons she couldn't explain. "My Cammy, he's real," she thought, her mouth suddenly dry. But in that dream, I wanted to know what's behind that blindfold. Her fingers twitched at her sides, a bizarre impulse to reach out and touch him, to confirm he wasn't just an apparition washing over her. For a split second, haired boy paused in his stride, his head tilting slightly in her direction as if sensing her attention. A small, almost imperceptible smile curved the corner of his mouth before he continued on his way, disappearing into the crowd of applicants. Izumi shook her head, forcing herself back to reality. "Focus, Izumi. You're here to become a hero, not daydream about mysterious boys," she scolded herself, adjusting her backpack straps. With one last glance toward where the blindfolded boy had vanished, she squared her shoulders and followed the stream of students into the building to take the exam. Still, as she walked through UA's imposing entrance, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something important about that boy, something that connected to her brother's disappearance and the strange dreams that had been haunting her nights. Written exam. The examination hall fell silent as ectoplasm glided to the front of the room, his ghostly presence commanding immediate attention. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees as he moved, the white vapor of his body curling slightly at the edges. With a subtle gesture of his pale hands, his quirk activated, and multiple clones materialized throughout the large space, positioning themselves strategically to monitor every student, one for every 4 rows, creating an inescapable net of supervision. "You have exactly 1 hour to complete this exam," his echoing voice announced, the sound seeming to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls and settling into the students' ears like a physical presence. "After you finish, please remain seated and turn your paper over. The exam will be collected once the time limit expires." His hollow eyes scanned the room methodically, pausing briefly on a few nervous faces. "If you have any questions during the examination period, raise your hand, and one of my clones will assist you." Izumi took a deep breath, centering herself as she turned over her test booklet. The paper was crisp and official, the UA logo embossed at the top in subtle silver ink. The first section opened with questions about pre-quirk Japanese history, covering the economic revolution of the early 21st century and the societal impacts of the first quirk manifestations. She worked through them methodically, her pen moving with practiced efficiency, the soft scratching sound joining the chorus of similar noises throughout the room. The luminescent baby born in Qingqing City, China marked the beginning of the Meta era, she wrote confidently, her handwriting neat and compact. Initial societal response included mass panic, religious fervor, and government containment efforts, evolving into regulated integration over the following decades. The exam continued with sections on geography, challenging English comprehension passages, complex mathematical equations, and finally, an extensive portion on quirk theory and contemporary hero protocols. Some questions were straightforward knowledge checks, while others required creative problem-solving and application of hero ethics to complex scenarios. One particular question caught her attention. A villain with a quirk that creates explosive pressure waves is threatening a crowded shopping center. The building's structural integrity is already compromised. You have the ability to either directly engage the villain to prevent further attacks, or be focused on evacuation and structural support. There is no correct single answer. Explain your chosen approach and justify your prioritization. Izumi chewed her lip briefly before crafting her response, explaining how the specifics would determine her approach: civilian proximity, villain psychology, available backup, and structural analysis, all factoring into a dynamic decision rather than a fixed protocol. 45 minutes into the allotted hour, Izumi completed her final answer. She reviewed her work quickly, making minor corrections before turning her paper over as instructed. Her shoulders relaxed slightly as she set down her pen, fingers slightly cramped from the intense writing session. Glancing around discreetly, she noticed most students hunched over their papers, expressions ranging from focused concentration to barely concealed panic. Many seemed to have barely reached the halfway point of the exam booklet, frantically flipping pages to assess how much remained. A boy with spiky red hair 2 seats ahead was practically vibrating with nervous energy, his pencil tapping rapidly against his temple. To her left, a girl with long purple hair was squinting at a particularly difficult physics problem, her eraser shavings forming a small pile at the edge of her desk. They're testing more than just knowledge, Izumi realized, observing the varying progress of her fellow examinees. This is about time management, working under pressure, and prioritizing information, all essential skills for hero work. It's a practical test disguised as an academic one. As she scanned the room, her eyes caught on a familiar figure several rows ahead. The white-haired boy with the blindfold was also sitting back in his chair, his exam paper already flipped over. Despite his obscured eyes, there was a relaxed confidence in his posture that suggested he felt completely at ease with his performance. His head was tilted slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. One hand rested casually on the desk, while the other twirled a pen between long fingers with impossible dexterity. When the hour concluded, Ectoplasm's voice cut through the desperate scribbling and sighs of frustration. "Time is up. All writing implements down, please." His clones moved efficiently through the aisles, collecting papers from relieved and distressed students alike. A few attempted to squeeze in last-second answers, only to have their pens gently but firmly removed from their hands by the nearest clone. The sound of shuffling papers and closing booklets filled the room, punctuated by a few groans of disappointment. Several minutes later, while the examinees remained seated, Ectoplasm consulted a tablet one of his clones had brought him. The ghostly hero's expressionless face somehow conveyed surprise as he reviewed the information, his posture straightening slightly. "Preliminary results indicate 2 standout performances," he announced, his modulated voice revealing a hint of surprise. "Izumi Yagi," and he paused briefly at the second name. Glancing once more at the tablet, as if to confirm what he was seeing, "Izuka Gojo have achieved perfect scores, despite completing the exam well ahead of schedule." A wave of murmurs swept through the room like a sudden breeze, growing louder as the information sank in. Izumi felt dozens of eyes turned toward her, some curious, others skeptical, a few clearly resentful. She kept her gaze forward, her cheeks warming slightly under the scrutiny, but couldn't help noticing the white-haired boy Izuka Gojo turn slightly in his seat. Though she couldn't see his eyes behind the blindfold, she felt the weight of his attention, accompanied by that same small, enigmatic smile she'd noticed earlier. It wasn't smug or boastful, more like the smile of someone sharing a private joke. "This is completely unfair," a voice complained loudly from the back, cutting through the whispers. A boy with slicked-back blue hair stood up partially, gesturing with agitation. There wasn't enough time to answer everything properly. How could anyone finish early unless? Maybe they had prior knowledge of the test, another suggested, a girl with insect-like mandibles, the accusation clear in her buzzing tone. Other students nodded in agreement, glancing suspiciously at both Izumi and the blindfolded boy. Ectoplasm's clone nearest to the complainer solidified, growing more substantial as it loomed over them. The temperature around that section of the room dropped noticeably, causing several students to shiver involuntarily. UA's examination process is designed to identify various aspects of heroic potential, it stated coldly, its voice somehow both quiet and penetrating. Time management and performance under pressure are crucial skills in emergency situations. Those who excel demonstrate qualities valuable in the field. The The clone's hollow eyes swept across the disgruntled students. If you cannot complete a paper test within the allotted time, how will you respond when lives are at stake and seconds matter? The accusers fell silent, properly chastised. A few had the grace to look embarrassed. As students began gathering their belongings, the rustle of backpacks and scrape of chairs filling the previously tense silence, Izumi shouldered her own bag. She caught one last glimpse of Satoru Gojo as he moved effortlessly through the crowd toward the exit. Despite his blindfold, he navigated the room with uncanny precision, never bumping into desks or other students. There was something both fascinating and unsettling about his movements, too perfect, too aware. When someone accidentally dropped a water bottle in his path, he stepped over it before it had even stopped rolling, as if he'd anticipated its trajectory. "Who are you? Why do you share the same first name as my brother?" she wondered, following the stream of applicants out of the room. The coincidence felt too significant to ignore. "And why do I feel like I should know you?" As if sensing her thoughts, the white-haired boy paused at the doorway, turning his head slightly in her direction. For just a moment, Izumi could have sworn she saw a faint blue glow emanating from beneath his blindfold. There and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Practical exam. The students filed into the vast auditorium, taking their seats in neat rows that curved upward from the central stage. The space buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of examinees whispered among themselves, their voices creating a subtle background hum like distant bees. Some fidgeted with their exam papers. Others sat rigid with anticipation, and a few attempted to project calm confidence despite the tension evident in their tightly gripped hands. Satoru Gojo slipped into a seat near the back, his white hair standing out among the sea of more conventional colors. Despite the blindfold covering his eyes, he navigated the space with perfect ease, as if he could see better than anyone else in the room. A few curious glances were cast his way, but he paid them no mind, settling into a posture that was both relaxed and somehow attentive. Then, a spotlight cut through the dim lighting, creating a perfect circle of illumination at the center of the stage. Footsteps echoed dramatically before a figure strode into view with theatrical flair. A tall, slim man with long blonde hair styled into an impressive upward spike behind his head appeared, sporting a small, neatly trimmed brown mustache. His rectangular eyes, with their unusual concentric pupils and greenish-yellow irises, scanned the crowd, while his face maintained an almost unnaturally wide smile. The absence of visible nostrils only added to his cartoonish, larger-than-life appearance. His hero costume was as flamboyant as his personality, a black jacket, with an exaggeratedly tall collar studded with metal accents, matching black pants, and knee-high boots that gleamed under the spotlight. Tan shoulder pads complemented his red belt and elbow pads, all adorned with similar studs. Black fingerless gloves completed the outfit, along with the distinctive directional speaker that always obscured his neck. A pair of headphones with Hage emblazoned across the band rested above his orange-tinted sunglasses. With a dramatic flourish of his arms, he called out to the audience, his voice amplified to fill every corner of the massive room. "Welcome to today's live performance. Everybody say, H-E-Y. He cupped his right ear expectantly, leaning forward as if anticipating a roaring response. Instead, he was met with awkward silence and a few scattered coughs. A single enthusiastic hey came from somewhere in the middle rows, making the silence afterward even more pronounced. Undeterred, Present Mike straightened up with a chuckle. "Tough crowd? That's okay, you're saving your energy for the main event. It's the voice hero, Present Mike," Izumi whispered excitedly, her green eyes widening with barely contained enthusiasm. "I listen to his radio show every week. His perspectives on hero work are so insightful and inspiring. I wonder if all the UA teachers are active pro heroes? That would make sense considering. Can you shut up with that little tangent?" Bakugo growled from the seat to her right, not bothering to lower his voice. His crimson eyes narrowed in annoyance, one hand already clenched into a fist on the armrest between them. A small wisp of smoke rose from his palm, betraying how close he was to activating his quirk out of irritation. Izumi immediately pressed her lips together, her cheeks flushing slightly as she redirected her attention to present Mick's explanation. She tucked a strand of green hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd never quite outgrown. The voice hero was gesturing dramatically toward a large screen behind him that had illuminated to show various settings. Each cityscape appeared in succession, highlighting different terrains from downtown metropolitan areas to suburban neighborhoods. Listen up, listeners. Here's how the practical exam will play out. You'll all be experiencing 10-minute mock battles in super hip urban settings. After this presentation, you'll head to your assigned battle centers. Think of it as a series of movie sets, each one designed to test different aspects of your heroic potential. As President Mike continued his energetic explanation, Bakugo glanced down at the information sheet that had been placed on the desk in front of him. His sharp eyes narrowed as he noticed a particular detail. Looks like kids from the same school will be split up, he remarked, tapping the sheet with his finger where their assigned battle centers were listed. Battle Center A was highlighted on his paper, while he could see that Izumi showed Battle Center B. Izumi leaned slightly to examine her own sheet, nodding in understanding. It seems that way. All right. Our examinee ID numbers are one number after the other, but we get assigned to different cities. Her analytical mind quickly grasped the reasoning behind this arrangement. They must want to prevent friends from working together or maybe stop rivals from sabotaging each other. What a pain, Bakugo said with an annoyed expression, a hint of genuine disappointment in his voice. I was really looking forward to crushing you. The statement held his usual aggressive tone, but there was something almost like respect buried deep within it, a recognition that she was worth defeating. His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary before returning to the stage. On stage, President Mike was now explaining the scoring system, using animated graphics that appeared on the screen behind him. As he spoke, cartoonish robots of different sizes and designs marched across the display, each disappearing in a comical explosion when touched by a stylized hero figure. Each mock city is filled with 3 types of robotic villains, worth different points depending on difficulty. Your goal is simple: use your quirks to disable these faux villains and earn points. The more you take down, the higher your score. President Mick's voice carried a contagious enthusiasm that seemed wasted on the nervous audience. The screen displayed silhouettes of 3 different robots, each with a point value hovering beside it. The smallest had a single mechanical arm, while the largest boasted multiple appendages and what appeared to be heavy armor plating. We've got 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers. The higher the points, the tougher the robot. So choose your battles wisely, listeners. He wagged his finger dramatically at the audience, his voice dropping to a more serious tone despite maintaining its volume. And let me add, attacking other examinees is strictly prohibited. We're looking for heroes here, not villains, so play nice, yeah? Anyone caught interfering with other examinees will face immediate disqualification. May I ask a question? A clear, authoritative voice cut through the auditorium. The spotlight swung to illuminate a tall, muscular teenager with a wide frame standing rigidly in his seat. He had short, dark blue hair, meticulously parted on the right side of his head with a small shaved patch near the base. His square eyes matched the angular shape of his jaw, and thin, hooked eyebrows gave him a perpetually serious expression behind rectangular glasses that glinted in the spotlight. Yes, you may ask, Examinee 7111, President Mike responded enthusiastically, pointing dramatically at the student. The floor is yours, listener. The blue-haired teen stood with perfect posture, radiating an almost excessive formality. He raised the printout in one hand while adjusting his glasses with the other, his movements precise and deliberate. Every gesture seemed calculated, as if he'd practiced proper question-asking etiquette for this very moment. On the printout, you've listed 4 types of villains, not 3, he stated, his voice carrying clearly through the room. He tapped a finger against a specific section of the paper with mechanical precision. With all respect, if this is an error on official UA material, it is shameful. We are exemplary students. We expect the best from Japan's most notable school. A mistake such as this won't do. Without waiting for a response, he pivoted sharply and extended his arm to point directly at Izumi. And you with the curly hair, he declared with the same rigid authority. Izumi blinked in surprise, pointing to herself uncertainly as dozens of eyes turned in her direction. She shrank slightly in her seat, not accustomed to being the center of attention. "You've been muttering this entire time," the blue-haired student continued, his voice carrying a note of righteous indignation. "Stop that. You're distracting the rest of the students. If you can't take this seriously, then leave this school." His gaze was stern, unyielding behind his glasses as he delivered what he clearly felt was justified criticism. Izumi shrank further in her seat, her face reddening as she whispered a silent sorry that barely carried beyond her own lips. Bakugo, surprisingly, seemed to tense beside her, his expression darkening at the public calling out of his childhood friend. Not satisfied with his double admonishment, the student's gaze swept across the auditorium until it landed on a figure seated several rows back. He raised his arm once more, pointing with unwavering certainty. "And you with the blindfold." Near the back of the auditorium, Izuka sat with his posture relaxed but perfectly balanced, the white blindfold across his eyes making it impossible to tell if he was paying attention or sleeping. His head was tilted slightly, as if listening to something beyond the present moment. A small, almost imperceptible smile played at the corner of his lips. "If you also are not here to take this seriously, you can leave as well," the blue-haired student declared. "This exam determines our futures as heroes. Such casual disregard is—" His words cut off abruptly as an invisible pressure descended upon him, making sweat instantly bead on his forehead. The air around him seemed to grow heavy, making it suddenly difficult to maintain his rigid posture. The student sitting nearby felt it too, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. With casual, almost lazy movements, Izuku reached up and lifted his blindfold just enough to reveal a single eye, an intense, oceanic blue that seemed to glow. Inner light. The gaze held no humor, none of the casual playfulness that had occasionally flickered across his features during the written exam. Instead, there was only a penetrating coldness that seemed to reach directly into the soul. "Listen here, you Temu Metal Sonic," Izuka said, his voice soft yet somehow filling the entire auditorium without effort. Each syllable was measured, precise, and carried a weight far beyond the actual volume. Students in the front rows found themselves leaning forward to catch every word, while those in the back heard him as clearly as if he were standing beside them. "If you hadn't interrupted Present Mike over here, he was going to explain about that fourth robot. So take that dill out of your uptight butt and sit the down." The words weren't shouted, yet they seemed to reverberate through the room with impossible force. The blue-haired student's knees buckled slightly as he sank back into his seat, his face pale and a slight tremor visible in his hands. The pressure that had held him dissipated as quickly as it had appeared, though a residual tension remained in the air. Izuku allowed the blindfold to slip back into place, concealing his eye once more. He adjusted his posture slightly, appearing completely at ease despite the stunned silence that had fallen over the auditorium. A few students nearest to him had unconsciously edged their seats away, creating a small bubble of space around him. "You can continue, Present Mike," he said calmly, as if nothing unusual had occurred. For perhaps the first time in his professional career, the voice hero seemed momentarily at a loss for words, staring at the white-haired student with an unreadable expression before clearing his throat and recovering his showman's demeanor. "Thank you, Examinee 999, Present Mike said, recovering his composure with remarkable speed. His voice returned to its enthusiastic pitch as he flashed a bright smile. "But the young listener over there does raise a valid point. The fourth villain type is indeed worth 0 points. It's just an obstacle we'll be throwing in your way." The screen behind him suddenly displayed an enormous silhouette of a robot that dwarfed the other 3 types. The animation showed smaller figures running away from it as it lumbered through a cityscape. "There's one in every battle center. Think of it as a hurdle you should try to avoid," Present Mike continued, making an exaggerated dodging motion. "It's not that it can't be beaten, but there's kinda no point to engaging with it. I recommend my listeners try to ignore it and focus on the ones that'll actually earn you points." Several students exchanged nervous glances, while others seemed to be making mental notes. The blue-haired student who had been shut down by Izuku remained rigidly in his seat, his composure mostly recovered, but a faint sheen of sweat was still visible on his forehead. From his seat, Izuku tilted his head slightly, processing this new information behind his blindfold. So basically it's like traps in video games, he thought, a small smirk forming on his lips. But I expect this should be a secret element to this whole test. I mean, the entire purpose of this exam is to search out students who could be good candidates for heroes, not just those who can mindlessly accumulate points. His fingers tapped rhythmically against his knee as he continued his analysis. A zero-pointer that everyone's told to avoid interesting. There's definitely more to it than Mike is letting on. Nothing at UA is ever that straightforward. On stage, Present Mike spread his arms wide in a grand gesture, his voice rising to its crescendo. That's all I got for you today, listeners. I'll sign off with a little present, a sample of our school motto. He paused dramatically, the lights dimming slightly before spotlighting him more intensely. As General Napoleon Bonaparte once laid down, a true hero is one who overcomes life's misfortunes. You're ready to go beyond. His voice reached a fever pitch as he cupped a hand to his ear, leaning toward the audience expectantly. Let me hear you say it. Plus, the response from the nervous examinees was tepid at best, with only a few scattered voices weakly echoing, "Ultra." Present Mick's smile didn't falter despite the lackluster response. We'll work on that enthusiasm when you're students. Good luck, everyone. Yeah. As the lights came back up and students began gathering their materials, Izuku remained seated, allowing the crowd to thin before he made his move. His mind was already racing ahead to the practical exam, calculating possibilities and planning contingencies. Whatever this test truly measured, he was determined to show them exactly what Satoru Gojo was capable of. UA Entrance Exam Battle Center B. The bus ride to the battle station was fast but noisy and chaotic. Examinees were squeezed together shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with nervous energy and competitive tension. Some students fidgeted with their gear, while others stared silently out the windows. The more confident ones began talking loudly, either bragging about their quirks or attempting to intimidate those they perceived as weaker competition. My hardening quirk is perfect for this kind of test, a red-headed boy boasted nearby, punching his fist into his palm with a solid thunk. Those robots won't stand a chance against me. Well, my acid will melt through their metal like butter. A pink-skinned girl countered with a sharp-toothed grin, wiggling her fingers that seemed to glisten with a subtle sheen. Won't even need to get close to them. I can shoot tape from my elbows, added another boy, demonstrating by letting a small strand shoot from his elbow. Great for immobilizing targets. Izuku paid no attention to the posturing around him, his mind entirely focused on the task ahead. Behind his blindfold, his thoughts raced through potential strategies and scenarios. He sat with perfect posture, one leg crossed over the other, seemingly at ease despite the tension surrounding him. Several students had deliberately chosen seats far from him, creating a small bubble of space in the otherwise packed bus. When the bus finally came to a stop with a pneumatic hiss, he got off with smooth, deliberate movements, avoiding the crush of anxious students who pushed and shoved their way toward the exit. The white-haired boy paused for a moment at the bottom of the bus steps, his head tilting slightly as he took in the enormity of UA's facilities. Even without removing his blindfold, he could sense the scale of what surrounded him, the massive walls towering at least 30 meters high, the sprawling artificial cityscape with its mixture of concrete, glass, and steel, the subtle electromagnetic hum of hidden cameras and equipment. The air itself felt different here, charged with possibility and engineering brilliance. They really spare no expense, he murmured to himself, impressed despite his usual nonchalance. His fingers twitched slightly at his sides, as if measuring the dimensions around him. Must be nice having government funding and top hero endorsements. This place makes most hero agency training grounds look like playground sandboxes. Izuku adjusted his outfit, a form-fitting long-sleeve compression top in midnight blue that highlighted his lean, well-defined physique, paired with light gray sweatpants featuring an elastic waistband and cuffed ankles. His white athletic sneakers were simple but practical, offering good grip and maneuverability. The blindfold remained firmly in place, a stark white band against his wild white hair that seemed to defy gravity itself, sticking up in various directions despite the light breeze. Several examinees gave him curious or wary glances, the incident from the auditorium still fresh in their minds. Whispers followed him as he moved through the crowd with uncanny precision, never once bumping into anyone despite his apparent visual impairment. That's the blindfold guy. How's he even going to see the robots? Did you feel that pressure in the auditorium? What kind of quirk is that? Maybe the blindfold is part of his quirk, or maybe he's just showing off. A small group of students deliberately shifted away as he passed, creating a path that he navigated with a knowing smirk on his lips. He could feel their apprehension, their confusion, and he savored it. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Meanwhile, across the testing area, Izumi stood with her mouth slightly agape, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of Battle Center B. The mock city stretched before her like something from a movie set, complete with realistic streets, buildings of various heights, and even decorative elements like streetlights and benches. The skyscrapers gleamed in the morning sunlight, their windows reflecting the blue sky above. "This place is as big as an entire district," she whispered in awe, fidgeting nervously with the zipper of her track jacket. Her heart pounded in her chest, partly from excitement, partly from fear. Did they build this just for the entrance exam? That's insane. Izumi's outfit was carefully chosen for maximum mobility. A black and white Nike track jacket with a distinctive white panel across the chest and crisp white piping that accentuated her athletic build. Underneath, she wore a supportive sports top, paired with black, high-waisted Nike leggings featuring a white swoosh logo along the leg. Her white socks and black Nike Dunk Low sneakers completed the practical ensemble. Her green hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, secured with a simple elastic band. She surveyed the crowd of examinees, noting the diversity of body types and expressions, some confident, others as nervous as she felt. A girl with earphone jacks hanging from her earlobes stood nearby, tapping her foot to some silent rhythm. A boy with multiple arms stretched them all simultaneously. Her green eyes eventually spotted a familiar brunette standing a short distance away, hands pressed together in what appeared to be either meditation or prayer, her eyes closed in concentration. The girl's round face looked peaceful despite the tension surrounding them. "Oh yeah, I forgot to thank her for helping me this morning," Izumi realized, remembering the kind girl who had prevented her embarrassing fall at the entrance gates. The memory made her cheeks flush slightly. She seemed really nice. Maybe we could. She stopped herself, shaking her head. No time for making friends now. This was a competition, after all. Still, basic courtesy demanded she at least express her gratitude. She started to make her way over, carefully navigating through the clusters of students, some of whom were doing last-minute stretches or psyching themselves up with personal mantras. Before she could reach the brunette, a firm hand clamped down on her shoulder. Izumi flinched at the unexpected contact, a small squeak escaping her lips as she turned to find herself face to face with the same bespectacled teen who had called her out in the auditorium, the one Izuku had so thoroughly humiliated. Up close, she could see the perfect crease in his pants, the impeccable knot of his athletic shoes, the rigid set of his jaw. His glasses gleamed in the sunlight as he looked down at her with rigid disapproval, his square jaw set in a severe line. "That girl is attempting to focus before the crucial examination," he stated in the same formal, almost robotic tone, his hand gesturing in precise, chopping motions. "What are you doing? Approaching to distract her? Perhaps sabotage your fellow examinees? Such behavior is unbecoming of a potential UA student." Izumi's shoulders hunched as she began to stammer out a response, her confidence immediately crumbling under his intensity. Her fingers twisted together nervously. "And no, I just wanted to." Before the blue-haired student could continue his tirade, another hand descended on his shoulder from behind, this one applying noticeably more pressure than was comfortable. His words died in his throat as he felt an invisible weight bearing down on him, causing sweat to immediately bead across his forehead and his glasses to slip slightly down his nose. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" came Izuku's deceptively calm voice, the words flowing like honey laced with poison. The bespectacled teen turned slowly, his movements stiff as if moving through molasses, finding himself face to blindfold with Izuku, whose presence seemed to command the space around them despite his relaxed posture. Several nearby examinees backed away, creating a small clearing around the confrontation. A few pulled out their phones, ready to capture whatever might happen next. I thought I made myself clear in the auditorium, Izuku continued, his head tilted slightly as if studying an interesting but ultimately disappointing specimen. One hand rested casually in his pocket while the other remained on the blue-haired boy's shoulder, fingers barely seeming to apply pressure despite the obvious effect. This is your final warning. Mind your own business and focus on the exam, because next time you decide to be an officer for someone else's actions. The pressure intensified momentarily, causing the blue-haired wince, his knees nearly buckling. A small sound, something between a gasp and a groan, escaped his throat. You might find yourself missing a limb. Izuku finished with a lazy smile that somehow made the threat even more chilling, his teeth gleaming white against his pale skin. Got it? RoboCop. The pressure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Izuku removed his hand, giving the student's shoulder a light pat that seemed almost friendly if not for the preceding threat. Good luck with the exam, Izuku added, the cheerful tone making several onlookers shiver. Try not to get your stick up the rear caught in any robot gears. As Izuku walked away, whispers erupted among the witnesses. Some looked impressed, others terrified. The blue-haired student remained frozen in place, his face pale, but his posture quickly reassembling into something rigid and formal, though a slight tremor in his hands betrayed his composure as he mechanically adjusted his glasses. Izumi watched the white-haired boy disappear into the crowd, an unreadable expression on her face. She wasn't sure whether to feel grateful for his intervention or unsettled by the casual menace he projected. Something about him was familiar, not just from the auditorium incident, but something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. Gathering her courage, she decided to continue with her original plan and thank the brunette before the exam began, casting one last glance at the still-shaken blue-haired student. Okay, listeners. Present mixed voice suddenly boomed from hidden speakers around the battle center, causing several jumpy examinees to yelp in surprise. Get ready. The practical exam begins in 60 seconds. Remember, go beyond. Plus. He paused expectantly, but only a few scattered voices responded with a weak ultra. The pro-hero's sigh was audible through the speakers. The atmosphere immediately shifted as examinees snapped to attention, the confrontation forgotten as they prepared to face whatever challenges UA had in store for them. Some took defensive stances, others looked ready to sprint. The brunette's eyes flew open, her concentration broken by the announcement, but there was determination in her gaze now. Izumi took a deep breath, centering herself. This was it, the moment that would determine her future. Izumi took a deep breath, centering herself. This was it, the moment that would determine her future. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, then relaxed as she mentally recited the calming technique her mother had taught her years ago. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. The familiar ritual calmed her racing heart, though it couldn't completely silence the doubts whispering at the back of her mind. As the last seconds of the countdown ticked away, she noticed something strange. The massive gate at the entrance of Battle Center B had begun to slide open, almost imperceptibly at first. Most examinees were still focused on present mix announcement, but both Izumi and Izuku's attentive gazes caught the movement immediately. Without hesitation, a blur of blue and orange shot forward, darting through the barely open gate and disappearing into the mock city. It happened so quickly that most examinees only registered the movement after the fact, their heads turning in confusion. Izumi blinked. It had to be the white-haired boy, she realized. No one else moved with that distinctive confidence. Hey, that's cheating, someone shouted, voice cracking with indignation. The countdown isn't even finished, yelled another, pointing accusingly at the still opening gate. Protests erupted from the crowd, faces turning red with indignation. Some were already looking to the officials for intervention, while others muttered about unfair advantages. The blue-haired student with glasses looked particularly outraged, his arm shooting up rigidly as if he were still in a classroom, his whole body vibrating with righteous anger. Before the complaints could gain momentum, Present Mick's voice boomed through the speakers again, this time with a hint of amusement that made Izumi's stomach drop. "What are you guys doing standing around?" he called out, his voice echoing across the testing grounds. "There are no countdowns in real battles. That number and those two examinees you're all admonishing actually got the right idea." His words hung in the air for a split second before chaos erupted. Realization dawned on the crowd like a bucket of cold water. This was part of the test. They were already being evaluated, and they were failing. "Go, go, go," Present Mike urged, enthusiasm crackling through the speakers. The mass of students surged forward in a panicked stampede, bodies colliding as they all tried to squeeze through the gates simultaneously. Elbows jabbed into ribs, shoes stepped on feet, and more than a few curses were exchanged in the frantic rush. Someone's quirk accidentally activated in the panic, sending a small shower of sparks into the air that only added to the confusion. Izumi, who had been poised on the balls of her feet since noticing the gate's movement, managed to dart ahead of the main crowd. Her athletic training gave her the edge as she slipped through gaps between larger examinees, her smaller frame working to her advantage. She cast a quick glance back, spotting Uraraka getting jostled by the crowd, the brunette's face showing momentary panic as she was pushed and pulled by the chaotic tide of bodies. Without thinking, Izumi reached back, grabbing the girl's wrist and pulling her forward. "Come on," she shouted over the din, her voice nearly lost in the cacophony of shouts and thundering footsteps. The brunette's surprised expression quickly transformed into a grateful smile as they broke free from the worst of the crush, running side by side into the mock city. The testing ground opened up before them, a sprawling urban landscape with buildings of various heights and designs, perfect for simulating real hero work. "You're here too, Izumi-chan," Uraraka said between breaths as they ran deeper into the mock city, her round cheeks flushed with exertion. "Yeah, I forgot to thank you for what happened in the morning," Izumi replied, offering a quick smile. The brunette sheepishly scratched the back of her head, her eyes warm with friendliness. "I guess we're even," Uraraka said, her voice light despite the pressure of the situation. That as more examinees finally poured into the testing ground, many skidded to a halt in shock. Where they had expected pristine streets waiting for their heroic debuts, they instead found destruction already in progress. Robot parts littered the ground like technological confetti, sparks flying from severed mechanical limbs. The distinctive sound of metal being crushed echoed from several blocks away, followed by a mechanical wail that was abruptly silenced. "Are those already destroyed?" A tall examinee with silver hair stared in disbelief at the remnants of what had once been a two-pointer robot, now little more than a pile of twisted metal. He nudged the wreckage with his foot, jumping back when it emitted a pathetic spark and a dying electronic whine. A girl with vines for hair picked up a robotic head, examining the clean slice that had separated it from its body. The cut was so precise it looked almost surgical, the edges smooth as if cut by a laser. Who could have done this so quickly? She wondered aloud, the vines in her hair curling with curiosity. In the distance, the unmistakable crash of a building partially collapsing sent a cloud of dust billowing into the air, followed by mechanical screeching that abruptly cut off. The ground trembled slightly beneath their feet, and several examinees exchanged nervous glances. The blue-haired student who had confronted Izumi earlier stood frozen in shock, his glasses slightly askew. His rigid posture seemed to have melted away, replaced by genuine bewilderment. "Impossible," he muttered before sprinting down a side street in search of intact targets, his movements now tinged with urgency rather than just precision. As the dust settled and examinees scattered throughout the mock city, a white-haired figure stood atop a 5-story building, hands casually in his pockets as he surveyed the chaos below. The blindfolded boy's lips curved into a satisfied smile, pieces of robots floating suspended in the air around him before being compressed into dense metal balls that dropped to the ground with thunderous impacts. The sun caught on his white hair, making it gleam almost like a halo against the clear blue sky. Honestly, Izuku murmured to himself, flicking a finger to send another compressed ball of robot parts crashing into a cluster of one-pointers attempting to surround a struggling examinee below. They really should have made these things more challenging. His voice carried a hint of disappointment, like a master chef serving a mediocre meal. He rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck before vanishing in a blur of movement, hunting for more worthy prey in this mechanical safari. Izuku cupped his hands together, feeling that familiar surge of power coursing through his veins. The sensation never got old, like electricity dancing beneath his skin, humming with potential. A cool tingle spread from his core to his fingertips as he accessed the limitless energy that had once belonged to another life, another time. His fingertips traced small, almost imperceptible patterns in the air, motions that came to him as naturally as breathing. Behind his blindfold, his eyes remained closed, yet he could perceive everything around him with crystal clarity. Each robot's movement registered in his consciousness like bright pinpoints of light against a dark canvas, their metal joints creaking as they searched for targets, the subtle vibrations in the ground beneath his feet telegraphing their approach from all directions. A three-pointer lunged at him from behind, its mechanical arm whirring through the air. Izuku didn't even turn around. He simply stepped sideways, his body seeming to blur momentarily before reappearing 2 meters to the left. The robot's attack met nothing but empty space. "Too slow," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. With a casual flick of his wrist, he extended his index finger toward the confused robot. A barely visible ripple distorted the air between them before the machine suddenly crumpled inward, as if crushed by an invisible hand. Metal screeched and sparked as the robot collapsed into a compressed heap of scrap. Another group of robots, 2 one-pointers and a 2-pointer, detected the destruction of their comrade and converged on his position. Izuku tilted his head slightly, sensing their approach from 3 different directions. His lips curved into a wider smile. "Come on, this is too easy," he sighed, sounding almost disappointed. With a subtle gesture, he teleported again, appearing directly between the 3 machines. Before they could recalibrate their targeting systems, his hands moved in a fluid sequence, each motion precise and economical. The robots froze mid-action, then fell apart in neat sections, their power cores disabled with surgical precision. As he straightened up, dusting off his hands, Izuku felt a familiar tingle at the back of his neck, the sensation of being watched. He turned his blindfolded face toward one of the hidden cameras mounted on a nearby building, that knowing smile still playing on his lips. For a brief moment, he could almost sense the faculty members on the other side of the lens, their confusion and fascination washing over him like waves. Izuku rolled his shoulders, feeling a satisfying pop as he stretched. 57 points, he counted mentally. Should be more than enough to pass. "I hope you're enjoying the show," he whispered, just loud enough for the camera's sensitive microphones to pick up. In the observation room, the UA faculty members sat in a darkened chamber filled with glowing monitors, their faces bathed in the blue-white light of the screens. The control room hummed with quiet energy as teachers leaned forward in their seats, eyes tracking the movements of potential future heroes. Multiple displays showed different areas of the 7 testing grounds, giving the educators a comprehensive view of how each applicant performed under pressure. Principal Nizu perched on his specially designed chair, his small paws deftly manipulating a tablet. The diminutive principal was an unusual sight, a chimera who appeared to be some combination of several different animals. His white furred head resembled that of a mouse, complete with circular black eyes, one marred by a prominent scar, rectangular ears with pale pink insides that slanted outward, and an elongated muzzle tipped with a small round nose. Despite his animal-like appearance, the intelligence that gleamed in those eyes was unmistakably beyond human. Dressed impeccably in a white dress shirt, dark red tie, black double-breasted waistcoat, and matching dress pants, Nizu looked more like a businessman than a school principal. His orange lace-up sneakers with their comically thick soles seemed out of place with the rest of his attire, yet somehow suited his eccentric nature. "Isn't it?" Nizu remarked, his high-pitched voice cutting through the quiet murmurs of the other teachers. Clearly, the examinees have no idea how many villains are present or their locations. They have limited time, must cover a vast area, and hunt down every last target. His tiny paw swiped across the tablet, keeping meticulous notes of each teacher's observations. Intelligence gatherers, mobility experts, decision-makers, we can already see who excels in each category, he continued, his eyes never leaving the screens. Of course, remaining calm under pressure can be a huge advantage, as can pure power and combat ability. The principal paused, his gaze fixing on a particular screen where a white-haired boy moved with impossible speed, dismantling robots with what appeared to be effortless precision. There was something almost casual about the way the boy fought, as though he were merely going through the motions of a well-rehearsed dance. A three-pointer robot lunged at the blindfolded applicant, only for its metallic arm to pass through empty space as the boy sidestepped with barely a hint of effort. But then there's the rare case of someone who is a jack of all trades, Nisa said, tapping the screen showing Izuku. And those rare few who can use a combination of all these tactics, they're the ones to watch. Present Mike whistled low, adjusting his directional speaker as he leaned closer to the monitor. That kid's got style, yeah? Look at how he's not even trying. That's what I call plus ultra confidence. He pumped his fist excitedly, his spiky blonde hair nearly poking Eraserhead in the eye. Tone it down, Hisashi, Aizawa grumbled, shifting away from his boisterous colleague. Some of us would like to maintain our hearing. I'd say this year's group looks promising, a sultry female voice commented from 2 seats down, cutting through Mick's enthusiastic commentary. Midnight, the R-rated hero, leaned forward in her chair, her blue eyes gleaming with interest as she studied the screens. She was a tall, curvaceous woman with striking features, sky-blue eyes that tilted downward in the center, framed by unusually long eyelashes that fluttered when she blinked. Her dark purple hair fell in thick, spiky layers, the longest strands reaching past her waist. Her chin-length bangs were split into 3 sections, 2 swept to the sides, and 1 falling diagonally across her face, between her eyes. A small beauty mark dotted the skin below her left eye, and her nails were painted a glossy crimson. But I've got to admit, she purred, running her tongue slowly across her upper lip, the hottie in Battle Station B though. Her hero costume left little to the imagination, a breastless black leather leotard reminiscent of a corset worn over a skin-tight white bodysuit that emphasized every curve of her figure. The center of her leotard featured vertical red gemstone-like embellishments extending from collar to midriff. Her legs were clad in translucent black, thigh-high stockings attached to a burgundy utility belt studded with gold and fastened with a pentagonal buckle. Black knee boots completed the Dami-inspired ensemble, along with a small red mask outlining her eyes and handcuffs at each wrist. A flogger-style whip rested across her lap, her fingers idly stroking its handle. Midnight, came an exasperated Aizawa from beside her. Can you please control your tendencies, especially when discussing minors? Aizawa slumped deeper into his capture scarf, his gloomy eyes narrowing with disapproval. Dark bags hung beneath his eyes, evidence of yet another sleepless night patrolling the streets of Mizudafu. The underground hero's stubble had grown more pronounced since the start of exam preparations, his hair more disheveled than usual, if such a thing were possible. I'm merely appreciating the raw talent, she replied with a wink that suggested she was appreciating far more than that. She twirled a strand of purple hair around her finger. Besides, Shoyuta, when was the last time you saw someone move like that? It's almost like watching All Might, offered Cementos, his blocky fingers tapping thoughtfully against the armrest of his reinforced chair. The cement hero's usually stoic expression had softened with genuine curiosity. No, Midnight said, her playful demeanor momentarily replaced by professional assessment. She leaned in closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing. Something different, smoother, like he's not fighting against the world, but simply redirecting it, like water flowing around obstacles rather than smashing through them. 13 added from their seat at the end of the row, their space-themed helmet reflecting the monitor light. Efficient. Elegant. Nisa cleared his throat and pressed a button on his tablet, enlarging the feed showing Izuku on the main screen at the front of the room. The faculty collectively leaned forward, unable to hide their fascination with the white-haired applicant's display of skill. On screen, A three-pointer robot collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Izuku stood straight backed above the wreckage, not even breathing hard. The sunlight caught his white hair, making it shimmer like freshly fallen snow. His blindfolded face turned slightly, as though sensing the cameras watching him, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward in what might have been a knowing smile. For the briefest moment, it seemed like he was looking directly into the hidden camera, acknowledging his audience. "Remarkable control," muttered Snipe from the back row, the cowboy-themed hero adjusting his mask. "The boy hasn't fired a single wasted shot, so to speak. Every movement has purpose. His spatial awareness is off the charts," added Ectoplasm, forming a small clone on his palm as if to better demonstrate his point. "Especially considering the blindfold. Not once has he been caught by surprise, even from attacks coming from behind. It's almost as if he can see in all directions at once," finished Vlad King, his brow furrowed in concentration. Power Loader frowned at his own tablet, tapping the screen repeatedly as if trying to correct a malfunction. His yellow excavator, like helmet, tilted in confusion. "My sensors can't even get a proper reading on what his quirk actually is. It's like he's bending space itself. The data's all over the place." He tapped the device again, more forcefully this time. "I designed these systems myself, they don't just glitch like this." "What did his application say?" Vlad King asked, leaning forward with interest, a small drop of vital fluid floating between his fingers as he absent-mindedly manipulated it. "Gojo." "Izuku," Nizu replied without looking at his notes, his perfect recall on full display. "He's registered as quirkless, but I suspect he simply hasn't registered his quirk yet. His written exam scores were perfect." A murmur rippled through the observation room. Perfect scores were rare enough, but combined with this physical performance. "Quirkless? That's impossible," Vlad King scoffed, the vital fluid between his fingers solidifying momentarily before liquefying again. "No quirkless individual could perform like that." And yet, Nizu mused, his beady eyes twinkling with something like amusement. "That's what his records indicate." "How very curious." Aizawa's eyes narrowed further as he studied the white-haired boy on screen. Something about the teenager's movement struck him as oddly familiar, practiced, refined, beyond what a typical teenager should be capable of. There was history there, experience that couldn't be explained by training alone. "He moves like a pro," Aizawa murmured, almost to himself. "Like someone who's been fighting for years." Suddenly, Nizu's expression shifted, his ever-present smile taking on a sharper edge. His black eyes gleamed with an almost predatory light, and several of the newer teachers felt a chill run down their spines. Those who had worked with the principal longer recognized the look. It was the expression he wore when he was about to make things much more difficult. "Well then," Nizu said, his paw hovering over a red button on his control panel. "Let's see how they handle the real test." His voice carried a note of sadistic glee that seemed at odds with his cute appearance. He paused, glancing once more at the screen showing Izuku. "I'm particularly interested in seeing how our mysterious white-haired friend responds to a genuine crisis." Without hesitation, he pressed down firmly on the button, activating the final challenge. Back at Battle Center B, a subtle shift in the atmosphere caught Izuku's attention as he hovered mid-air, the familiar sensation of infinity keeping him aloft as effortlessly as breathing. The world around him slowed to a crawl, not through his technique, but through his heightened senses. Something was coming. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, a warning system honed through countless battles in another life. The first tremor was gentle, almost imperceptible. The second made the nearby buildings sway slightly. By the third, concrete began to crack in spiderweb patterns beneath the examinee's feet. Izuku's lips curled into a knowing smile. 3, 2, 1, he whispered to himself. The ground erupted. Asphalt and concrete chunks flew skyward as something massive pushed through from below. Dust clouds billowed, momentarily obscuring the emerging threat. When they cleared, even Izuku felt a flicker of appreciation at the sheer scale of what stood before them. The zero-pointer towered over Battle Center B, a mountain of gleaming metal and hydraulics. Its mechanical eyes, glowing crimson sensors, swept across the testing area with methodical precision. Each footstep sent vibrations through the earth that rattled teeth and windows. Shadows lengthened as it blocked out the sun, plunging portions of the battle center into premature dusk. Now this is interesting, Izuka grinned, feeling that familiar thrill of excitement bubbling up inside him, the same sensation he'd felt facing special-grade curses. His lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes behind the blindfold. Time to have some fun. He propelled himself forward through the air, white hair whipping in the wind like a banner. The sensation was exhilarating, like stretching muscles that had been cramped for too long. Around him, examinees scattered like ants, their panicked shouts creating a symphony of fear as dust and debris rained down. Run! Are they trying to kill us? Every man for himself. From his vantage point, Izuka took in the entire scene with crystal clarity. His curse technique allowed him to perceive everything at once, every fleeing examinee, every piece of falling debris, every minute adjustment in the zero-pointer's hydraulic systems. The mechanical behemoth's movements were almost laughably predictable to him, like watching a chess opponent telegraph their next 5 moves. His attention snapped to a familiar round-faced girl, the same one who'd nearly face-planted earlier. She was now trapped under fallen concrete, dust coating her chocolate-brown hair. Her face was a mask of pain as she struggled to free her ankle, small whimpers escaping between gritted teeth. Vital fluid trickled from a scrape on her cheek, bright against her dirt-smudged skin. But what really made his vital fluid simmer was the stream of applicants sprinting past her without a second glance, self-preservation overriding any heroic instincts. A blonde boy actually jumped over her without breaking stride. Another shoved away someone who had momentarily paused to look back. All except one, a green-haired girl, trying desperately to lift the concrete slab, her muscles straining with effort. Izumi's face was flushed with exertion, her school uniform torn at the sleeve, determination burning in eyes that reminded Izuka too much of his own before the white hair, before the blindfold, before he remembered who he truly was. Well, I'm guessing that's Sis's friend. Isn't that the same girl she tried to calm down, back at the entrance? Izuka muttered, observing the scene with newfound interest. 2 cute girls in distress. How cliché. Despite his dismissive words, something in him stirred a remnant of the hero he once was, perhaps. Or maybe just the instincts of someone who had seen too much suffering to stand idly by. He dropped from the sky, landing with barely a sound on the cracked pavement. Debris tumbled around him, slowed to a crawl by his infinity before it could touch him. Dust particles suspended in mid-air like tiny stars. He weaved through the fleeing crowd, some too panic-stricken to even notice the white-haired boy passing through their midst like a ghost. The weight is too much, Izumi was saying, her arms straining against the concrete, pinning Uraraka's ankle. Sweat dripped down her face as she pushed with everything she had, veins standing out on her forearms. I'm not strong enough yet. Izumi-chan, please just go. Uraraka's face was pale with fear and pain, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, mingling with the dust on her cheeks. That thing's coming this way. You'll get hurt. No way. I'm not leaving you here. Izumi's voice cracked with determination, sweat beading on her forehead as she braced her feet and pushed harder, pebbles digging into her palms. That's not what heroes do. The shadow above them darkened suddenly, sunlight blotted out by metal. Both girls looked up to see the zero-pointer's massive foot descending directly toward them, tons of metal about to crush them into paste. The foot blocked out the sky entirely, an eclipse of steel and wires. Their eyes widened in shared horror, the moment stretching like taffy. Izumi threw herself over the other girl, a futile shield against the inevitable. Both squeezed their eyes shut, bracing for impact, bodies tense for pain that would surely come. The round-faced girl whispered something that might have been a prayer or a goodbye. The crushing blow never came. A strange, electric blue light filtered through their eyelids, pulsing with otherworldly energy. The air around them grew heavy, charged with power that made skin tingle and hair stand on end. They opened their eyes to see the robot's foot suspended mere meters above them, encased in pulsing blue energy that hummed with power. Standing beside them, arm outstretched and completely relaxed as if holding back a building-sized robot was nothing, was Izuku. Blue light danced around his fingertips, and the air around him seemed to distort slightly, reality itself bending to his will. You know, he drawled, sounding almost bored despite the strain any normal person would feel. There's a difference between bravery and stupidity. Staying put like this kind of falls into both categories. Curse technique. Lapse blue. He thought to himself, the familiar power humming through his veins like an old friend. The metallic foot hung suspended, caught in his spatial manipulation, reality bending to his will. The strain was negligible, like holding a feather rather than tons of metal. The power flowed through him with practiced ease, muscle memory from a lifetime of battles against enemies far more terrifying than this mechanical toy. Cursed technique reversal. Red. Izuku pushed his palm forward, and the energy around the robot's foot flared crimson like a dying star. The air crackled with power as space itself compressed and then violently expanded. The zero-pointer staggered backward as if hit by an invisible battering ram, its massive frame creaking in protest, metal groaning under forces it wasn't designed to withstand. Its balance systems fought to compensate, hydraulics whining under sudden stress. Without missing a beat, Izuku knelt beside the trapped girls, his movements fluid and precise. The blue energy enveloped the debris, lifting it effortlessly off the round-faced girl's ankle, as if it weighed nothing more than a feather. The concrete rose into the air, hovering for a moment before he casually flicked his wrist, sending it flying toward the zero-pointer's leg. "Can you stand?" he asked, his tone softer than before, the cockiness momentarily set aside. His eyes, hidden behind the blindfold, assessed the injury with expertise born from countless battlefield triage situations. Uraraka attempted to rise, but wobbled dangerously, her face contorting with pain. Her legs buckled beneath her like wet paper, a small cry escaping her lips as she tried to put weight on her injured ankle. Izuku caught her before she hit the ground, his reflexes lightning fast, one arm sliding under her knees and the other supporting her back. "I'll take that as a no." He scooped her up in a fluid motion, cradling her against his chest. The Uraraka's face bloomed with color, turning a shade of red that would make tomatoes jealous. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her side, bizarrely calm despite the chaos around them. "Hold on. You don't have to," Uraraka stammered, blushing in embarrassment, overriding pain for a moment, her hands clutching reflexively at his shirt. "Hang tight," he interrupted, offering a wink that was visible below his blindfold. "This might feel weird, like really weird. Some people throw up their first time, but try not to, okay? This is my favorite shirt." Before she could process his warning, space distorted around them, reality folding like origami in his hands. Colors inverted momentarily, gravity seemed to shift directions, and her stomach lurched as though she'd dropped from a great height. One moment they were by the debris, the next they had appeared beside the crowd of stunned examinees watching from a safe distance. Several yelped in surprise, one boy with spiky red hair actually falling backward onto his rear with a startled curse. "Someone help her," Izuku instructed, carefully transferring the injured girl to a nearby examinee with multiple arms. "Keep weight off that ankle. It might be broken. And get her some water, she's in shock." The multi-armed boy nodded dumbly, too stunned to question the white-haired enigma who had just appeared out of nowhere. The brown-haired girl looked back at Izuku, her eyes wide with gratitude and something like wonder. "Thank you," she managed, her voice small but sincere. "You saved us." Before anyone could respond or thank him further, he vanished again with a subtle ripple in the air, reappearing beside Izumi, who was still staring at the zero-pointer that was recovering its balance, its mechanical joints whirring as it prepared to advance again. Servos hummed as it recalibrated, sensors now focusing directly on the pair who had damaged it. She jumped when he materialized, a small eep escaping her lips. "How did you?" "That thing's still functioning," Izuku cut her off, nodding toward the robot that now seemed to have locked onto them specifically. "We need to take it down permanently before it hurts someone else. Those evacuation protocols are obviously not working as intended." Izumi's expression shifted from startled to determined, her initial shock giving way to resolve. Her eyes hardened, shoulders squared, hands clenching into fists at her sides. In that moment, Izuku saw something of himself in her, not the current him, but the boy he'd been before, remembering his past life. Earnest, determined, painfully sincere. "What's the plan?" she asked, ready to follow his lead despite having only just met him. Izuku eyed the colossal machine, calculating angles and weak points with practiced ease. Years of fighting cursed spirits had taught him how to find vulnerabilities in opponents much deadlier than this mechanical behemoth. His fingers twitched with muscle memory that his current body hadn't actually experienced. "Hit it with everything we've got," he explained, pointing upward. "Aim for the head, that's where the central processing unit should be. Take out the brain, the body follows," was basic combat strategy, something he'd learned lifetimes ago. "Together?" Izumi asked, her voice steady despite the danger. She dropped into a ready stance, green lightning beginning to crackle around her limbs like a living electrical storm. Her eyes, so similar to his own, blazed with determination. "Unless you've got something better to do," he replied with a smirk, rolling his shoulders as if preparing for nothing more strenuous than a morning stretch. "Besides, I'm curious to see what that flashy quirk of yours can do." There was genuine interest there. Something about her power reminded him of something, though he couldn't quite place it. It felt familiar in a way that tickled at the edges of his memory, like a song he'd once known but couldn't recall the lyrics to. The raw energy she emitted had a distinctive signature that resonated with him on some fundamental level. "Be ready," Izuku said to her, his voice dropping to a tone that carried surprising authority for someone his age. Izumi nodded, determination hardening her features. She flexed her fingers, tiny crackles of emerald energy dancing between them as she prepared herself. 3. Izuku started to count down, his voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. The massive zero-pointer loomed above, its shadow casting them into momentary darkness as it shifted position. Around them, other examinees scattered like ants from a disturbed hill, their panicked shouts fading into the background. 2. He felt his focus sharpening, the familiar sensation of power gathering at his fingertips. The world seemed to slow around him as his senses heightened, a remnant of centuries of battle experience compressed into muscle memory. The sounds of the testing ground faded to a distant murmur, his vision tunneling until all he could see was their mechanical target and the girl beside him. 1. The air around Izuku rippled slightly, distorting like heat waves rising from sun-baked asphalt. He bent his knees, calculated the exact trajectory needed, then launched himself skyward in a single powerful leap. The concrete beneath him couldn't withstand the pressure, cracking into a small crater as he ascended toward the zero-pointer's massive head. Dust and fragments of pavement exploded outward from his launch point, catching the sunlight like a halo of debris. For a heartbeat, he hung alone in the air. Then, after a moment's hesitation that spoke volumes about her courage, Izumi followed. Glowing red veins appeared across her skin as she propelled herself upward with a determined shout, her face contorting with the effort of controlling one for all at a percentage her body wasn't yet ready to handle. The air cracked around her like a gunshot as she burst upward. They soared toward the robot's head, the white-haired boy and the green-haired girl silhouetted against the sun like twin comets. The wind whipped past them, tugging at clothing and hair, the ground falling away below. Izuku could feel the familiar rush of adrenaline, but it was different now, not the jaded thrill of battle he'd known as Gojo, but something fresher, almost nostalgic. Like revisiting a childhood playground with adult eyes. Clear your mind. Izuku, focus your cursed energy. To one single point, he thought to himself. He gathered curse energy into his left fist, feeling the power condense and intensify, an old friend returning after too long an absence. Crimson and black energy swirled around his arm, pulsing with destructive potential that felt both foreign and intimately familiar in this new body. The power hummed through his veins, eager for release after years of dormancy. It sang in his blood, a melody he had thought forgotten. Beside him, Izumi's entire right arm glowed with red veins pulsating beneath her skin, her face set with determination despite the pain clearly etched across her features. Her teeth were gritted, jaw clenched tight against what must have been excruciating. Tiny fractures were already forming beneath her skin, spider webbing across her arm like cracks in glass. Yet she didn't falter, didn't hesitate. Her eyes remained fixed on their target, burning with the same determination he'd once seen in another's eyes, in another life. In that suspended moment, as they reached the apex of their jump, Izuku caught her gaze. A silent understanding passed between them, two individuals with overwhelming power, both carrying burdens no one else could truly comprehend. For an instant, the years and lifetimes separating their experiences seemed to collapse, and he saw in her the reflection of what he might have been in this world, had his path been different. The Zero-Pointer's massive red sensor eyes tracked their approach, its metal body already pivoting to counter the threat. Pneumatic arms shifted position, defensive protocols engaging as it recognized the incoming danger. A high-pitched whine emanated from its core as it prepared to deploy countermeasures. Metal panels slid open along its chassis, revealing weapon systems that had remained hidden until this moment of perceived threat. Time seemed to stretch as they reached the robot's head, suspended in that final moment before impact. A breath held before the plunge. The sun glinted off the Zero-Pointer's metallic shell, highlighting every rivet and panel of its construction. In the distance, Izuku could hear the faint gasps and shouts of onlookers, their voices thin and distant in the higher altitude. Below them, a small crowd had gathered at what they hoped was a safe distance. Among them, Uraraka cupped her hands around her mouth, shouting encouragement that was lost to the wind. Next to her, a boy with glasses made sharp, chopping motions with his hands, his face a mixture of alarm and reluctant admiration. The Zero-Pointer sensors flashed more intensely as it computed the imminent threat. A warning klaxon began to sound from somewhere within its massive frame, echoing across the testing ground. Izuku could feel the vibration of its internal mechanisms responding to their approach, could almost sense the artificial intelligence making split-second calculations to counter their attack. It didn't matter. Nothing it could do would be enough. Not against what they were about to unleash. In the observation room across campus, the UA staff watched with bated breath, the multiple screens showing the dramatic scene from different angles. Recovery Girl's hand hovered over the emergency protocols, ready to activate them at a moment's notice. Present Mike had fallen uncharacteristically silent. Aizawa leaned forward, eyes narrowed with just slipped in moments before, leaned forward in his seat, his skeletal frame tense. His sunken eyes widened at the sight of not one, but two students taking on the massive Zero-Pointer that had sent others fleeing. The resemblance between the two was striking, though one wore power like a comfortable old jacket, while the other wielded it like a newly forged sword, dangerous but unfamiliar. There's no reward for confronting the Zero-Pointer, he thought, a smile tugging at his gaunt features. No practical advantage. But that's exactly the point. His gaze lingered on the green-haired girl especially. This is what separates true heroes from the rest, the willingness to act when others won't, to risk everything for strangers. The symbol of peace clenched his fist unconsciously, his own memories of heroic rescues flashing through his mind. Fluid bubbled at the corner of his mouth, which he quickly wiped away with a handkerchief. Show us what you're made of, young ones. Back at the testing grounds, Izuku and Izumi reached the apex of their jump, now level with the Zero-Pointer's head. Its red sensors swiveled toward them like malevolent eyes, tracking their approach with mechanical precision. Sunlight glinted off its metal plating, creating an almost blinding reflection as its hydraulics hissed menacingly. The massive arms began to raise defensively, steel fingers unfurling to intercept the two white-haired teens hurtling toward it. Black Izuku thought, feeling crimson lightning crackle along his fist. The energy pulsed through his veins, familiar yet somehow new in this reborn body. This technique had once shattered mountains and torn through the strongest cursed spirits in another life. As the power flowed through him, memories flickered, fragments of battles against beings that didn't exist in this world. The power felt right, like reconnecting with a part of himself long dormant. Beside him, Izumi drew back her glowing arm, red veins pulsing beneath her skin in intricate patterns that intensified around her like a network of living lightning. Her white hair floated upward in the energy field surrounding her body, and her gym uniform strained at the seams from the pressure building within her. Despite this, her focus remained unbroken, eyes locked on her target with unwavering determination. "You know, I always dreamed about flying to the sky like a comic book hero," Izumi thought, a small smile touching her lips despite the danger. "This is what it feels like. I just wish you were here to experience it with me, brother." The thought was fleeting but powerful, bringing both strength and a momentary pang of sadness for someone not present. Time seemed to slow as they hung suspended before the metal giant, a heartbeat stretching into eternity. Dust particles hung motionless in the air, sunlight fracturing through them into tiny rainbows. Izuka could hear Izumi's determined breathing beside him, could feel the heat of their combined power warming the air between them, creating a pocket of compressed energy that made his skin tingle. The robot's internal systems whirred louder, recalibrating its defense protocols. A metallic screech filled the air as additional armor plates shifted into place around its central processing unit. Too little, too late. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, crimson energy and emerald lightning reflecting in mirrored gazes. No words were needed. They moved as if they'd trained together for years, as if some cosmic connection bridged the gap between strangers. There was understanding in that glance, recognition of something shared beyond explanation. In that moment, two voices, one spoken aloud, one silent, merged into a unified battle cry that echoed across the testing grounds, bouncing off buildings and reverberating through the hearts of everyone watching. Flash! Smash! Their fists connected simultaneously with the robot's head is wrapped in crimson-black energy that seemed to bend light around it, hers an emerald lightning that sparked and danced across her skin. For a split second, nothing happened, the universe itself seeming to hold its breath, then reality buckled. A shockwave erupted from the point of impact, rippling outward in visible waves of distorted air. The sound came a moment later, a thunderclap that swallowed all other noise in the testing ground. The air compressed, then explosively expanded, creating a vacuum that sucked debris upward before blasting it outward in a perfect circle. The zero-pointer's head crumpled like tissue paper, then disintegrated entirely. Metal warped and twisted as if made of clay, circuit boards shattered into dust, and wires snapped like overstretched rubber bands. Sparks erupted in cascading waves, and metal plating peeled away like orange skin under two eager fingers. The massive body swayed, its programming attempting to compensate for a head that no longer existed. Systems failed in cascading explosions of electricity and smoke, internal components overloading and detonating in chain reactions that traveled down its metal spine. The behemoth toppled backward with a thunderous crash that shook the entire testing ground, sending dust billowing upward in a mushroom cloud that momentarily blotted out the sun. Below, the gathered examinees stared in stunned silence, mouths agape, some shielding their eyes from the debris raining down harmlessly at the edges of the impact zone. The dust settled slowly, revealing the full extent of the destruction, a 20-ton robot reduced to scattered parts, its central processing unit obliterated beyond recognition. A boy with engines in his legs stood frozen mid-gesture, his usually stern face slack with astonishment. Another with red spiky hair whistled low and long, his sharp teeth visible in his open-mouthed grin. A girl with earphone jacks hanging from her earlobes removed her hands from her ears, eyes wide with disbelief at what she had just witnessed. "Holy cow," whispered a boy with spiky blonde hair marked by a black lightning bolt, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. Did they just punch the hell out of that thing?" The sentiment seemed to break the spell. Murmurs spread through the crowd, growing louder as the implications sank in. Izuka hung suspended in the air, the aftermath of their combined attack rippling through the atmosphere. The zero-pointer lay in ruins below, a monument to destruction that sent clouds of dust billowing across the testing grounds. For a brief moment, He allowed himself to savor the familiar rush of power, the way curse energy had responded to his call after so long dormant him. But his satisfaction evaporated instantly when he spotted Izumi plummeting toward the ground, her body limp as a rag doll, green hair whipping wildly around her unconscious face. The backlash of One for All had clearly overwhelmed her untrained body. "Oh no," he muttered, muscle memory from another lifetime taking over. Without conscious thought, his fingers formed the mudra that had once been as natural as breathing. Space warped around Izumi as he activated Lapse Blue, the gravity in her immediate vicinity distorting. Her descent slowed, visibly not halted completely, but enough to buy him precious seconds. The technique felt rusty, requiring more concentration than it once had, but the fundamentals remained ingrained in his soul. Calculating her trajectory with mathematical precision, Izuku twisted his fingers into another familiar pattern. Light bent around him as he teleported to the ground in a flash, leaving behind a faint shimmer in the air where he'd been. The air crackled slightly with residual energy, a subtle reminder of powers beyond ordinary quirks. He positioned himself beneath her falling form, feet planted firmly in a stance that distributed weight optimally. As Izumi fell into his waiting arms, he absorbed the impact with practiced efficiency, his knees bending slightly as he cradled her semi-conscious body. She was surprisingly light, fragile, almost, and something protective stirred within him that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. Izumi's eyelids fluttered, struggling against the pain that coursed through her body. When they finally opened, revealing emerald eyes clouded with exhaustion, she gazed up at his face. Her pupils widened slightly as recognition dawned. Through the haze of pain, she noticed something that made her breath catch the same constellation of freckles that dusted her own cheeks mirrored on his face. A connection sparked between them, something deeper than coincidence. Her lips parted as if to speak, but the full backlash of One for All surged through her system, sending fresh waves of agony through her broken limbs. In that moment of vulnerability, a single word escaped her lips, barely audible even to Izuku who held her close. "Onii-chan," she whispered, the familial term slipping out unconsciously before her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. Izuku froze, the word hitting him like a physical blow. Something stirred in the recesses of his mind, a memory, perhaps, or an echo of One. But before he could process it, he felt her go completely unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. "You overdid it," he murmured, examining the angry red lines that crawled up her arm like lightning seeking ground. Her fingers bent at unnatural angles, bones clearly fractured from the strain of channeling too much power through unprepared pathways. The pattern of injury was distinctive, not just broken bones, but the specific way her body had rejected the overwhelming power forced through it. It reminded him of something, though he couldn't quite place what. The dust around them began to settle, revealing the full extent of destruction they'd caused together. Other examinees cautiously approached, their footsteps hesitant on the broken concrete. Their faces registered shock, awe, and concern in varying measures. Some stared at the demolished zero-pointer, others at the unconscious girl in his arms. The blonde boy, with the black lightning bolt pattern in his hair, pushed through the gathering crowd, moving with urgency that suggested he knew Izumi personally. His eyes were wide with genuine concern, electricity crackling faintly around him as his emotions heightened his quirk's activity. "Is she okay?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. His gaze darted between Izuku and the unconscious girl, fingers fidgeting nervously at his sides. "That was insane. I've never seen anyone hit something that hard before." Several other examinees had formed a loose circle around them, their faces registering shock, awe, and concern in varying measures. Some stared at the demolished zero-pointer, its massive frame now reduced to smoking rubble, while others couldn't take their eyes off the white-haired boy who had seemingly teleported out of nowhere. "You both saved me," Uraraka said softly from where she sat nearby, her hand gently massaging her ankle where the robot had pinned her. Her round cheeks were slightly flushed, whether from exertion or embarrassment at needing rescue is unclear. "Thank you so much." The blond boy knelt down beside Izumi, his brow furrowed with worry. "She's always pushing too hard," he muttered, almost to himself. He glanced up at Izuku with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "That teleportation thing you did was awesome. Are you two related or something?" The white hair. Before Izuku could respond, which was probably for the best since social niceties had never been his strong suit in either lifetime, a calm voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "Time's up. The exam is now concluded. Please remain where you are for medical attention if needed." The announcement seemed to summon the diminutive figure who appeared moments later, parting the crowd of teenagers with surprising authority despite her small stature. Recovery Girl moved with efficiency that belied her elderly appearance, her cane tapping a rhythmic pattern against the concrete as she approached. My, what a mess, she tutted, her experienced eyes taking in both the destroyed robot and the injured examinees in a single sweeping glance. Her gaze lingered on Izumi with particular concern before shifting to Izuku. "Lay her down gently, young man. That's quite a display of power you two showed." Izuku carefully placed Izumi on the ground, supporting her head as he lowered her onto the concrete. He stepped back respectfully, giving the veteran healer space to work while remaining close enough to observe. Old habits of analyzing quirks and techniques resurfaced unbidden. The blond boy hovered anxiously nearby, occasionally shooting curious glances at Izuku. "I'm Kaminari, by the way," he offered, extending a hand after a moment's hesitation. "Dinky Kaminari." Izuku looked at the outstretched hand for a beat too long before remembering the social protocol. "Izuku Gojo," he replied, accepting the handshake with a brief nod. Recovery Girl leaned down with practiced ease, her lips puckering as she delivered her signature healing kiss to Izumi's forehead. The effect was immediate and fascinating to watch. Fractured bones realigned with soft crackling sounds. Swelling receded from angry red to faint pink, and torn muscle fibers knitted themselves back. Together, Izuku found himself mentally cataloging the quirk's effects, efficiency, and limitations, information that might prove useful later. "This one pushed herself too hard," Recovery Girl commented, her experienced hands gently turning Izumi's arm to examine it from all angles. Even at reduced output, she caught herself mid-sentence, eyes darting briefly to Izuku before continuing smoothly. Even when controlling her quirk, she's still channeling too much power through untrained limbs. The body needs time to adapt to such energy. Izuku kept his expression carefully neutral, though his mind raced at the slip. "She's done this before?" Izuku asked quietly, the question slipping out before he could fully consider it. Recovery Girl gave him an appraising look, as if weighing how much to reveal. "Some quirks require more adjustment than others," she said diplomatically, "especially those with raw power output." Recovery Girl moved efficiently to the brown-haired girl Uraraka, he recalled from earlier, who sat nearby massaging her ankle. Another healing kiss, and the girl's face relaxed as pain visibly left her body. "Thank you," Uraraka said earnestly to Recovery Girl before turning her warm gaze to Izuku. Her eyes were large and expressive, filled with genuine gratitude that made him slightly uncomfortable. "And thank you again. I don't know what would have happened if you two hadn't. Just doing what needed to be done." Izuku cut her off, shifting his weight awkwardly. In his past life, saving people had been incidental to his true purpose of eliminating curses. The pure, uncomplicated heroism these students aspired to felt alien to him, a language he could understand but couldn't quite speak fluently. A soft groan drew his attention back to Izumi. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first before gradually sharpening as she became aware of her surroundings. She looked momentarily disoriented, her gaze drifting over the gathered crowd before settling on Izuku standing above her. She began weakly, voice barely above a whisper. "The robot's scrap metal," Izuku confirmed with a slight smile that felt unfamiliar on his face, a ghost of an expression from another lifetime. Izumi blinked twice, her eyes widening slightly as recognition dawned. Despite the changes in his appearance, snow-white hair replacing his once forest green locks, and that single oceanic blue eye visible beneath the blindfold he'd worn at the auditorium instead of his familiar emerald gaze, she knew him instantly. The way he stood, The subtle tilt of his head as he assessed her injuries, even the quiet confidence that now radiated from him where uncertainty once lived, it was unmistakably her brother. 1,000 questions crowded her mind, pressing against her tongue, begging to be asked. How had he changed so drastically? What was this power he now wielded with such casual mastery? Where had he been all these months? But the throng of students pressing around them, the faculty members taking notes nearby, and her own weakened state made this the wrong moment for the conversation they needed to have. Their eyes met across the short distance between them, hers filled with confusion and wonder, his with a strange, ancient knowing that sent a chill down her spine. Something fundamental had changed in Izuku, something beyond physical appearance or newfound abilities. There was a weight to his gaze that hadn't existed before, as though he carried centuries of experience behind those blue eyes. She swallowed hard, ignoring the dryness in her throat, and gave him an almost imperceptible nod. A silent promise passed between them. Later. They would talk later. There would be time for explanations, for understanding what had happened to the shy, stammering brother she'd known all her life, the boy who had vanished, leaving this white-haired stranger with impossible powers in his place. His slight nod in return confirmed their unspoken agreement. Your power is impressive, but your control needs work. The words came out more bluntly than he'd intended, but tempering his observations had never been his strength, not in this life or his previous one. She attempted to sit up, wincing as her healing body protested the movement. Tiny sparks of green, residual energy crackled across her fingertips like miniature lightning bolts as she steadied herself against the makeshift cot. Recovery Girl tooted disapprovingly beside her, shaking her head at the extent of Izumi's self-inflicted injuries. I've been trying to lower the percentage. Like Almi, she caught herself abruptly, emerald eyes darting nervously toward the gathered students who were still milling about the testing grounds. No one seemed to be paying particular attention to their conversation, but she couldn't be too careful. Lowering her voice, she continued, like I was taught. But it's hard to gauge in the moment, especially when someone's in danger. Her fingers flexed experimentally, the pain already dulling thanks to Recovery Girl's quirk. Small bruises bloomed beneath her skin like watercolor paintings, changing from angry purple to yellowing green as the healing progressed. The power, it's like trying to control a flood with a paper cup, she admitted quietly. I keep thinking I've got the right level. And then she gestured at her damaged limbs with her good hand, a rueful smile crossing her face. When adrenaline's pumping, Izuku finished for her, recognizing the struggle written in her features. He remembered that feeling not from Gojo's perfected techniques, but from his own childhood struggles before his memories had fully awakened. You'll learn. The body adapts. He paused, considering her with renewed interest, his gaze analytical but not unkind. But you need proper training. Brute force will only get you so far. A look passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of something shared that neither fully understood. For a moment, Izuku felt as though he were looking at a reflection of himself from another timeline, another possibility. What might he have become without Gojo's memories and power? Someone like her, perhaps raw, determined, unrefined but burning with purpose. Recovery Girl cleared her throat, breaking the moment. You need rest, young lady. That healing took a lot out of you. She fixed Izumi with a stern but kind gaze, her tiny frame somehow imposing despite her size. Your body needs to recover its energy naturally now. No more heroics today. Around them, the other examinees began filing toward the exit, many casting backward glances at the destroyed zero-pointer or at the white-haired boy who had teleported mid-air. Conversations buzzed with excitement and speculation. A boy with spiky red hair was animatedly describing the fight to anyone who would listen, his hands making explosive gestures. Did you see how he just appeared out of nowhere? The red-haired boy exclaimed. So manly. That girl's punch, though, replied a blond boy with a black lightning bolt in his hair. Talk about power. As the crowd thinned, Izuku felt an unfamiliar restlessness settling over him. The test was over, and his objective was complete. He'd demonstrated his abilities effectively and secured his place at UA. Yet something kept him lingering, a sensation he couldn't quite identify. Was it concern for Izumi? Curiosity? Or something deeper that Gojo's memories couldn't quite explain? He glanced at Izumi one more time as recovery girl and Uraraka helped her to her feet. The brunette girl hovered attentively at Izumi's side, supporting her with genuine concern rather than the shallow platitudes he remembered from his old middle school. There was something in Izumi's determination, her willingness to shatter her own body to save a stranger, that stirred long-dormant memories. He saw in her the echo of a potential he'd once possessed, the earnest desire to help others that he'd lost somewhere in the centuries of his previous existence, buried under the weight of endless battles and cosmic responsibilities. "You did amazing," he heard Uraraka tell Izumi, her voice full of genuine admiration. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Izumi smiled weakly, her eyes finding Izuku's across the distance between them. A silent message passed between siblings, a promise of conversation to come, explanations owed, time needed. The space around him felt suddenly claustrophobic. There were too many people, too much noise, and too many questions he wasn't ready to answer. Faculty members were beginning to organize the remaining students, clipboards in hand, voices raised to be heard over the excited chatter. A man with a directional speaker for a head was corralling students toward debriefing stations, his voice carrying across the battleground. This wasn't his scene anymore. With a subtle gesture that few would recognize, index and middle fingers extended, a small circular motion that bent reality itself, Izuku twisted space around himself. The familiar sensation of infinity expanding and contracting washed over him as he teleported away from the battle center, leaving behind only a subtle ripple in the air where he had stood, like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending concentric circles outward before fading to nothing. His last glimpse was of Izumi's face, her eyes locked on his, recognizing what he was about to do, but powerless to stop him. In that final moment before he vanished, he saw something in her expression that would haunt him later, not anger or confusion, but a flash of understanding that felt impossibly familiar. In the observation room high above the testing grounds, unseen by the departing students, a collection of UA's finest educators studied the monitors with varying degrees of interest. The room hummed with quiet conversation as they analyzed the day's performances. But one section of footage commanded particular attention. All Might stared intently at the monitor where the white-haired boy had vanished. His sunken eyes narrowed thoughtfully, skeletal fingers tapping against his knee in an unconscious rhythm. Though his gaunt form revealed nothing of the symbol of peace the public knew, his piercing blue eyes remained sharp as ever, tracking every detail of the replay. "Interesting," he murmured, his voice barely audible even in the quiet room. "Very interesting indeed." He tapped a control on the console, rewinding the footage to watch again as the boy teleported mid-air to catch Izumi. The movement was fluid, practiced, not the desperate flailing of a teenager discovering abilities in the heat of the moment, but the calculated precision of someone with experience. The way he distributed his weight upon landing, the exact positioning of his arms to absorb impact, the calm assessment of injuries afterward all spoke of training far beyond what a first-year applicant should possess. "I believe we've found something unexpected this year," All Might said, leaning forward slightly. Next to him, Principal Nizu tilted his head curiously, his beady eyes reflecting the blue light of the screen. The hybrid animal principal's tail swished slightly to tell that his formidable intellect was engaged in full analytical mode. "The white-haired boy, Gojo Izuku, according to his file," Nizu said, pulling up a digital dossier on a separate screen. "Yes," All Might nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen as he replayed the teleportation sequence for a third time. "There's something about him that seems familiar, like meeting someone you've known before, but can't quite place." He couldn't articulate the strange sense of déjà vu, but something in the boy's confidence, in the casual display of overwhelming power, triggered old memories. Not of enemies, no, this was different, but of someone who had once stood as an equal pillar in a different way. "His quirk is quite unique," Nizu observed, scrolling through the sparse documentation. His whiskers twitched as he frowned at the information. "Though that's the curious part, he's officially registered as quirkless according to his elementary school records and initial medical examinations." President Mike leaned over from his station, His directional speaker mercifully turned down to indoor volume. I know you said it earlier, but there is no way that the young listener is quirkless. Did you see how he gestured wildly, mimicking the teleportation? BZ disappeared, and then BZ caught Lil Yagi like it was nothing? Plus, those weird hand movements? Indeed, Niza continued, I'm guessing there's considerably more to this boy than what appears in his file. His abilities display multiple applications we haven't cataloged. Teleportation certainly, but there seemed to be something else at work when he avoided that robot's initial attack. On a separate screen, they could see footage of Izumi being helped to the recovery area by Uraraka and Recovery Girl. The elderly nurse was scolding her gently about overexertion, while the girl nodded sheepishly, stealing glances back at where Midoriya had been standing before his disappearance. All Might didn't respond immediately, his thoughts turning to his daughter, who carried his power Izumi Yagi, publicly registered under a different surname to protect her privacy. No relation to the boy despite their similar given names and striking white hair. The coincidence felt too significant to ignore, especially given how they had worked in tandem against the zero-pointer. The timing of his arrival, All Might mused quietly, just as Izumi launched herself, almost as if he anticipated exactly what she would do. Behind them, the door slid open with barely a sound. Aizawa Shoyuta entered, his perpetually tired eyes taking in the scene at a glance. His capture weapon hung loose around his shoulders as he approached, hands stuffed in his pockets. He has just come back. The teleporter, he stated rather than asked, having evidently been monitoring the situation from elsewhere. Ah, Aizawa-kun, Niza greeted cheerfully. Your assessment? Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly as he watched the replay cycle through again. Trained. Experienced. Hiding something. He paused, watching the footage carefully. And powerful. Too powerful for someone with no prior heroics education. He stepped closer, his gaze calculating as he studied the boy's movements frame by frame. That's not a newly manifested quirk. Those are ingrained muscle memories and battle instincts. His finger pointed to the screen. Look at his eyes. No panic, no hesitation. Just cold calculation. Even with Yagi falling at terminal velocity. All Might shifted uncomfortably. Aizawa had always been too perceptive for comfort. I'll take him, Aizawa said suddenly, surprising everyone in the room. Oh. Niza's ears perked up with interest. You're volunteering for a student? That's unprecedented, Aizawa-kun. The underground hero's expression remained impassive, but his eyes never left the screen where Gojo had vanished in that final teleportation. Keep an eye on the problem child, he muttered. And he's going to be in my homeroom. He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. One more thing, check his background thoroughly. Not just official records. Something doesn't add up with this one. As the door closed behind Aizawa, the remaining teachers exchanged meaningful glances. All Might turn back to the monitor, freezing the frame on Izuku's face the moment when he'd caught Izumi. There was something in those eyes, ancient, knowing, powerful, that sent a chill down even the symbol of Peace's spine. Yes, he agreed quietly. Something definitely doesn't add up. End of Volume 2. End credits scene. Izumi limped her way back to the Yagi residence, each step sending fresh jolts of pain through her battered body. The aftermath of One for All's power had left her right arm throbbing beneath Recovery Girl's bandages, and both legs felt like lead weights threatening to buckle with each careful step. Even with the healing quirk's intervention, her body still bore the consequences of pushing far beyond its natural limits. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as she finally reached the familiar front door. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fumbled with her keys, the metal scraping against the lock. Exhaustion washed over her in waves, making even this simple task feel monumental. When she finally pushed the door open, the warm scent of home embraced her, a comforting mixture of cooking spices and the faint floral notes of her mother's favorite air freshener. I'm home, she called out, her voice raspier than she'd expected, throat still dry from the dust of the battle center. She had barely taken 3 steps into the living room when she saw Inko. Her mother had been pacing back and forth, phone clutched so tightly in one hand that her knuckles had gone white, worry lines etched deep across her forehead. The moment their eyes met, Inko's face transformed anxiety, melting into momentary relief before fresh concern bloomed as she took in her daughter's battered state. "Baby," Inko gasped, rushing forward with that particular mix of panic and love that only mothers seemed capable of. Her hands hovered just inches from Izumi's injuries, afraid to touch and cause more pain. "Are you all right? Your father called me about what happened at the exam, the giant robot, your fall. He was beside himself, we both were." Despite the maternal panic in her voice, Inko's hands were steady as she guided Izumi to the couch. Already reaching for the first aid kit, she kept meticulously stocked in the side table drawer. The familiar routine of her mother's care made Izumi's eyes sting with sudden tears. "I'm fine, Mom. Really," Izumi reassured her, wincing as she sank into the cushions. The couch had never felt so soft, her body surrendering to its embrace. "Hurting but fine. Recovery girl helped a lot, though she did scold me pretty thoroughly about recklessness." Inko's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she carefully examined her daughter's arm, gently turning it to check recovery girl's handiwork. "You pushed yourself too hard again, didn't you? Just like your father, never knowing when to stop." Her voice carried equal measures of exasperation and pride. A small smile tugged at Izumi's lips despite the pain. Being compared to all might to her father never failed to warm her heart, even when it came with a gentle scolding. The weight of his legacy was heavy, but moments like these made it feel more like an embrace than a burden. "There was a girl in danger," Izumi explained softly. "I couldn't just stand there." Inko sighed, tucking a strand of Izumi's white hair behind her ear. "Of course you couldn't. You're too much like him for that." As Inko dabbed antiseptic on a small cut the healing hadn't quite closed, Izumi suddenly felt the weight of what she'd seen pressing against her chest. The memory of those familiar eyes, that impossible presence. "Mom," Izumi said suddenly, reaching out with her less injured hand to catch her mother's fidgeting fingers. There was an urgency in her voice that made Inko pause, green eyes widening slightly as they met her daughter's intense gaze. "I have something to tell you. Something important." She took a deep breath, squeezing her mother's hands between her own. The words felt simultaneously impossible and yet desperate to be spoken, like they might burn her from the inside if kept contained any longer. "I saw him there," she whispered, voice dropping as though the walls might be listening. "At the exam. I saw Izuku." The color drained from Inko's face so rapidly that for a moment, Izumi feared she might faint. Her mother's hands went slack in her grip, then suddenly tightened with surprising strength, nails pressing crescent moons into Izumi's palm. "What did you say?" Inko whispered, her voice barely audible, fragile as spun glass. The question hung in the air, weighted with years of grief and unanswered prayers. "Izuku," Izumi repeated, stronger now, more certain. "He was there, Mom. Different, but it was him. He changed appearance, wise his smile." She swallowed hard. "I'd know him anywhere." A single tear escaped Inko's eye, tracing a silent path down her cheek as her hands began to tremble. "Izumi," she breathed, voice catching on her daughter's name. "Are you sure? After all this time?" "I'm sure," Izumi nodded, feeling the weight of certainty in her bones. "He saved me, Mom. When I was falling, it was like he appeared out of nowhere, just like in my dreams." As the words left her mouth, a sudden, uncomfortable realization washed over Izumi. Her mind flashed back to that morning at Yue's entrance, the way her heart had skipped when their eyes first met. She recalled her dreams, too, where those same striking features had stirred something within her. The white hair, so similar to Izuku's own, the confident stance, those mesmerizing blue eyes behind the glasses. Her stomach twisted into a knot. "Oh God," she thought, her face draining of color as the pieces clicked in a terrible place. She remembered how her pulse had quickened at the sight of him, how her cheeks had flushed warm when he'd smiled, the flutter in her chest when he'd caught her mid-air. "He's my brother," she realized with mounting horror. The innocent attraction she'd felt now seemed twisted, wrong, a cruel cosmic joke she hadn't been letting on. Inko noticed the sudden change in her daughter's expression, The way Izumi's eyes widened with something beyond shock, something closer to revulsion. Her mother reached out, fingers trembling slightly. "Izumi? What's wrong? Sweetheart? You've gone pale." Izumi's throat tightened, words refusing to form. How could she possibly admit to her mother that she'd found her own brother attractive? The very thought made bile rise in her throat. She pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting the wave of nausea. She started, then stopped, swallowing hard. "I just realized something. That's all." "What is it?" Inko pressed gently, her eyes searching Izumi's face with growing concern. Izumi shook her head. She needed space, needed to process this disturbing revelation alone, away from her mother's perceptive gaze. I need to lie down," she managed, pushing herself up from the couch despite her protesting muscles. Her injured arm throbbed in time with her racing heart as she stood. Each step felt heavier than the last as she moved toward the stairs, her mind replaying every interaction with the white-haired boy with Izuku in excruciating detail. Inko reached for her, concern etched across her features. "Izumi, please, what is it? You're scaring me." Pausing at the bottom of the staircase, Izumi gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. The wood creaked under her grasp. "Just need some sleep," she murmured, not meeting her mother's worried gaze. "Everything hurts. We can talk more tomorrow." "But, please, Mom," Izumi whispered, her voice cracking. "I just need a minute." Without waiting for a response, she climbed the stairs with labored steps, wincing with each movement. Her mind was a whirlwind of confused emotions, joy at finding her brother alive somehow tangled with the mortification of her unwitting attraction. The universe had played a cruel trick on her, and she had no idea how to handle it. As she reached her bedroom door, her hand hesitated on the knob. A single thought echoed through her mind, persistent and terrifying. How was she ever going to face him knowing what she had felt? And worse, what if he had noticed? Spring's hand had gilded the city in hope, each avenue shimmering with the gentle optimism unique to new beginnings. Months had faded since the arduous UA entrance exam, the crucible where futures were forged or dreams were dashed. Now, as cherry blossoms drifted past windows and on a busy sidewalks, those who had passed prepared to step into legend. Within the Yagi household, the quiet hum of morning underscored a latent energy. The soft whir of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of the television in the living room, and the faint clink of dishes in the kitchen all wove together into a familiar, comforting soundscape. Sunlight, pale and golden, threaded through the curtains, painting shifting patterns across well-worn floorboards and the posters that lined the walls of Izumi's room, heroes mid-stride, fists raised, capes billowing. Bleep, bleep, bleep. The shrill sound of an alarm tore through the dimly lit room, shattering the stillness of early morning. A hand pale, slightly calloused, and sluggish with sleep shot out from beneath a heap of tangled covers and slapped the alarm clock, silencing its relentless blaring with a dull thud. The figure beneath the blankets stirred, a low groan escaping her throat as she pushed the heavy covers aside. Long, forest green hair, wild and unkempt from sleep, spilled over her shoulders and down her back, strands catching what little sunlight managed to slip past the curtains. The faint rays painted her hair with a muted emerald glow, hinting at a vibrancy the dim room failed to fully reveal. She sat up slowly, spine curling forward as she brought a hand to her face. With a sluggish motion, she rubbed at her eyes, fingers brushing against the edges of her lashes until her vision cleared. When she finally blinked fully awake, striking green irises stared back at the world. Even half-lidded and bleary with sleep, they held a sharp, inhuman glint. For a heartbeat, she simply sat there and listened to the fridge, to the TV, to the tiny creaks in the house she knew by heart. This was the last time these sounds would belong to a world where she was not yet a UA student. That thought sent a small, electric shiver racing down her spine. She stretched, vertebrae popping one by one as her arms reached toward the ceiling. Her muscles, still stiff from sleep, protested the movement before gradually easing. A faint yawn slipped out as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed and pushed herself to her feet. The old wooden floor creaked under her weight as she trudged toward the bathroom, steps heavy but unhurried. The soft click of the light switch broke the quiet, followed by a dull hum as the bathroom light flickered on. The small space brightened, revealing peeling edges of wallpaper and a mirror slightly fogged from the previous night's shower. In the glass, her reflection stared back at her. Long green hair falling messily around her face, pale skin still creased where the pillow had pressed against her cheek, and those narrow, reptilian reflected the harsh overhead light. She studied herself for a moment, expression neutral. This was the face that had stepped into the entrance exam's chaos and walked out accepted. Somehow, today, Hushie murmured, voice still rough from sleep. Leaning over the sink, she twisted the faucet handle. Cold water sputtered out, then steadied into a clear stream. She cupped her hands beneath it and splashed the water over her face. The icy shock dragged her further from the clutches of sleep, sending a sharp wakefulness through her nerves. Droplets clung to her lashes and dripped from her chin, landing in the basin with soft, rhythmic taps. She reached for her toothbrush, the motions practiced and precise. A small streak of toothpaste landed on the bristles, and she set about meticulously cleaning her teeth, every stroke controlled and methodical. As she brushed, her thoughts began to organize themselves, mentally running through the day's schedule. Teachers she'd have to face, classmates she'd rather avoid, and the countless little tasks that came with just existing in a world that had moved on without her. Homeroom, orientation or something like it, new classmates, Aizawa-sensei, if the rumors were right, training fields she'd only seen in pamphlets, a campus that had once seemed as distant as the moon. Her movements were deliberate yet unhurried, as though she were savoring what little quiet she had before the noise of the day caught up with her. When she finally rinsed out her mouth and put the toothbrush back in its holder, she felt more awake, but not necessarily more prepared. Steam soon began to curl out from behind the shower curtain as she turned the dial and stepped under the spray. Warm water cascaded over her, rolling down her back and shoulders in soothing waves. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth sink into her muscles, easing away the last traces of morning stiffness. Reaching for the bottle of shampoo, she squeezed a generous amount into her palm and worked it into her hair. Bubbles frothed quickly, the lather foaming into thick white streaks that contrasted with the deep green of her locks. She massaged her scalp slowly, fingers weaving through the long strands, feeling the tension melt away with each motion. The scent of the shampoo filled the small bathroom, a subtle herbal aroma with notes of mint and something faintly floral. It mixed with the steam, creating a calming haze that wrapped around her. Her breathing evened out, the quick, shallow inhales of early morning replaced by slower, steadier ones as she rinsed the foam away. The water carried the suds down the drain, leaving her green hair clean and gleaming, the color vivid even under the dull bathroom light. She let the water run over her shoulders a little longer than necessary, tracing the faint scars along her arms with her fingertips. The entrance exam had left its marks, nothing dramatic enough to be called a badge of honor, but enough to remind her that the path she'd chosen would never be gentle. Yue, she whispered to the tiles, as if testing the word one more time. It bounced back at her in muffled echoes, oddly small compared to the weight it carried. Once she finished, she shut off the water. The sudden silence was almost jarring after the constant rush of the shower. She stepped out carefully, feet pressing into a worn bath mat that had seen better days, and reached for a towel. She dried her hair first, rubbing it with firm, practiced movements until it was only slightly damp, then wrapped the towel around her shoulders as she padded back into her room. Her bedroom was small and simply furnished a bed, a narrow desk pushed up against the wall, a shelf lined with notebooks and a few well-worn All Might figures, and a closet that had been opened and closed so many times the door stuck slightly in its frame. Morning light seeped through the thin curtains now, illuminating dust motes drifting lazily in the air. On her desk, her UA acceptance letter lay neatly tucked beneath a paperweight, a cheap plastic All Might statue with a slightly chipped smile. She'd kept the letter visible on purpose. Proof. On the days when doubt clawed at her throat, she'd pick it up, trace the school emblem with her thumb, and remind herself that the future hadn't shut her out after all. She pulled open her drawer and reached for a crisp white t-shirt and a fresh pair of underwear from the neatly folded pile inside. The fabric was soft between her fingers, a small comfort amid the routine. Dressing began like a ritual. Shirt first, pulled over her head and smoothed down over her chest. Then underwear, quick and automatic. Her eyes shifted toward the closet, scanning for her newly acquired female version of the UA uniform, neatly hung and still crisp from its packaging. The UA high school student uniform was a symbol of pride and tradition, a long-sleeved, button-up white shirt that gleamed under the soft light, a tailored gray blazer adorned with sharp blue-green stripes on the collar and sleeve hems, exuding a sense of formality, a vibrant red tie fastened with a small golden clip that caught the light like a polished gem, and a dark blue-green pleated skirt that swayed gently with every movement. She reached out to retrieve the uniform, her fingers brushing against the smooth fabric. As she began to put it on, her movements were slow and meticulous, ensuring every detail was perfect, each button fastened securely, the tie adjusted to sit precisely, the blazer draped flawlessly over her shoulders. The ensemble felt both unfamiliar and empowering as she caught her reflection in the mirror, her deliberate actions transforming her appearance into that of a proud UA student. For a brief, absurd second, she wondered if the mirror would reject the image, insist she'd put on someone else's clothes by mistake. It didn't. Finally, she tied her green hair into a ponytail with a hair tie, fingers tightening the band twice to keep it from slipping. A few unruly strands fell against her cheeks. She let them be. The slight imperfection kept her from feeling like a stranger in her own skin. "First year, Izumi Yagi," she said quietly to her reflection, testing the words. They sounded surreal, but they were true. Izumi, poised on the cusp of destiny, moved through her room with a careful diligence that bordered on ritual. Her hands, though trembling with both excitement and trepidation, were precise as she inspected her school bag for the final time. Notebooks, neatly labeled, pens and pencils aligned in a small case. Her UA pamphlet, edges worn from being opened. Enclosed too many times to count. A small, folded photo tucked into the inner pocket, her and her family at the beach, sand stuck between their toes, her father's grin wide and unguarded. Today, she would walk the storied halls of UA High, the revered cradle of tomorrow's heroes. The thought alone sent a tight flutter through her chest, a mix of awe and pressure. Heroes had been made there. Legends had stood where she would stand. The weight of that reality pressed against her shoulders, invisible yet undeniable. She slid the zipper of her bag closed with a soft, final sound. There. No going back. Izumi, did you get everything you need? Her mother's voice floated down the hallway, warm with encouragement and edged with concern. There was a slight quiver at the end one Izumi had learned to recognize as her mother's way of masking worry with cheer. Izumi paused, fingers hovering over the strap of her bag. She pressed her lips together in thought, running mentally through the checklist she'd already gone over 3 times. Tissues, she called back. The word was simple, but laden, whether a shield against the allergies of spring or the uncertainty of beginnings. It was hard to tell. There was a soft chuckle from the hallway. I put a fresh pack in the bathroom cabinet last night. Don't forget your handkerchief, too. You always forget that. Izumi glanced at the folded square of fabric already laid out on her desk, then at the pair of neatly polished shoes waiting by the door. Already got it, she replied, a small note of pride sneaking into her voice. Footsteps approached, and a moment later, the door creaked open. Her mother leaned against the frame, apron still tied around her waist, a faint smudge of flour on her cheek. The scent of miso soup and grilled fish drifted in with her, warm and grounding. You look so grown up, her mother murmured, eyes softening as she took in Izumi's immaculate uniform, the pressed blazer, the carefully knotted tie, the skirt that fell just above her knees. UA High. How it still feels like yesterday you were running around the living room with that all-night blanket as a cape. Izumi flushed, ducking her head. And Mom, don't say it like that. It's embarrassing. Her mother's lips curved into a teasing smile. What? You were adorable. You used to shout, "I am here," and then trip over the coffee table. She stepped into the room, fingertips brushing invisible dust from Izumi's shoulder, smoothing a wrinkle that wasn't really there. "And now look at you. First day of UA. You really did it." The words settled over Izumi, heavier than they sounded. You really did it. The exam, the acceptance letter, the training, the late nights, the days she'd wanted to quit but hadn't. The memory of the entrance exam flashed behind her eyes, the roar of collapsing rubble, the screech of metal, the adrenaline burning through her veins as she'd pushed her body past its limits. "I only passed because I got lucky," Izumi said quietly, her gaze dropping to her hands. She flexed her fingers, as if half expecting the phantom ache of old injuries. There were so many people there who were stronger, faster. If that robot hadn't, she caught herself, biting down on the doubt before it could spiral. Her mother's hand came to rest gently on her cheek, tilting her face up. "Izumi, listen to me." Her voice softened, but there was a firmness beneath it, a steel that didn't often show. "You didn't pass because of luck. You passed because you worked for this, because you kept going even when it scared you." Izumi swallowed, her throat suddenly tight. "But what if I can't keep up? UA isn't just any school. Everyone there will be aiming to be number one." "That's true," her mother admitted, her expression turning thoughtful. "But you don't have to be number one today. Or tomorrow. Just be you. Do your best. Heroes aren't made in a day, right?" She ruffled Izumi's hair lightly, then fussed with her bangs to fix the damage. "Besides, you're a Yagi. Stubbornness runs in the family." A reluctant smile tugged at Izumi's lips. "Is that really something to be proud of? In your case?" "Absolutely." Her mother stepped back, taking a moment to admire her again. "Ah, I should have taken a picture before you put on your shoes." "Wait, don't move." She fumbled for her phone, already opening the camera app. "And Mom," Izumi protested, cheeks burning, "can't you do this later?" "This is later. I already missed earlier," her mother countered without missing a beat. "Come on, just one." "For me?" Izumi hesitated, then sighed in defeat. She straightened her back, forcing herself to relax her shoulders. Her mother snapped a few photos, humming in satisfaction. "There. Perfect. I'll send these to your father. He'll be jealous he couldn't see you off himself." A shadow of apology crossed her face. "He really wanted to be here, you know." "But—" "I know," Izumi interrupted quickly, not wanting to linger on the absence. "He's busy. He's working hard. As always." Her mother studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "Come eat before your breakfast gets cold. Big day like this, you can't go on an empty stomach." "Okay," Izumi replied, glancing around her room one last time. Her gaze lingered on the posters, the stacked training manuals, the little All Might keychain hanging from the edge of her desk lamp, the scuffed corner of the wall from when she'd tripped mid-workout, the notches on the side of her desk where she and Izuku had once secretly tracked their height. This room had seen bruises and tears, quiet victories and midnight doubts. And now, it would be the place she returned to as a UA student. Drawing a steadying breath, she slung her bag over her shoulder and followed her mother down the hallway. The familiar clicking of her heels against the floorboards sounded different today, sharper, more purposeful, like the echo of someone she was still learning how to be. The living room was bathed in the same soft morning light, the television murmuring quietly in the background with the daily news. A reporter's voice mentioned hero sightings and traffic updates, but Izumi's attention was anchored by the low table in the dining area. Bowls of steaming miso soup, rice, tamagoyaki, and grilled fish were neatly arranged, her place already set. As she sat down, her mother stole another glance at her, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Nervous?" Izumi picked up her chopsticks, staring at the shimmering surface of the soup. Tiny bits of tofu floated lazily, steam curling upward. "A little," she admitted. "Okay, a lot." "That's normal," her mother replied, pouring tea into her cup. "If you weren't nervous, I'd be more worried. Means you care about what happens." She took a sip of her own tea. "But remember, it's still a school. You'll make friends, complain about homework, rush to class when you're running late, maybe develop a crush or two. And Mom," Izumi nearly choked on her rice, face flaming again. Can you not say it like that? Her mother laughed, the sound bright and easy. I'm just saying, high school is more than just studying and training. Don't forget to live a little too. Her gaze softened. You deserve to enjoy this. Izumi didn't quite know how to respond to that, so she focused on her food, letting the familiar flavors ground her. The savory warmth of the miso, the gentle sweetness of the egg, the crisp edges of the grilled fish, each bite chased away a little more of the tightness in her chest. As she ate, the TV in the background cut to a brief segment on UA high archival footage of the towering campus, interviews with pro heroes who had once walked those same halls. Izumi's eyes flicked toward the screen, just in time to catch a younger All Might laughing, hand on his hip, cape billowing in a wind that probably hadn't been there. Her chest squeezed. Big place, huh? Her mother said quietly, following her gaze. But even the biggest schools are just made up of people. Teachers, students, kids with messy hair who forget their handkerchiefs. I didn't forget it this time, Izumi muttered automatically. I know. Her mother smiled. You're more prepared than you think. When Izumi finally set her chopsticks down, her mother checked the clock. You should get going if you don't want to be rushed. First day and all. Right. Izumi rose to her feet, heart thudding a little faster now. She moved to the entryway, slipping on her shoes with practiced motions. Her fingers lingered on the laces a second longer than necessary, as if stalling might somehow slow time. Her mother appeared beside her, holding out a small packet. Here, for the tissues you mentioned. Izumi accepted it with a soft laugh. Thanks. She slid it into her blazer pocket, patting it as if to confirm its reality. I'll be back by evening. Probably. You will, her mother said with quiet certainty. And when you do, I want to hear everything, from the moment you step through those gates to the moment you leave. Don't spare any details. That's a lot of talking, Izumi muttered, but there was affection in her tone. Her mother opened the door, and the world outside greeted them with cool, crisp air and the soft flutter of cherry blossoms drifting lazily to the ground. The city stretched out beyond their small doorstep, alive and vast and waiting. Izumi, her mother said, just before she could step out. Izumi turned, and their eyes met. I'm proud of you. No matter what happens today, remember that. The words lodged in Izumi's chest, warm and heavy. She swallowed, then gave a small, determined nod. I'll do my best. I know you will. With that, Izumi stepped out onto the street. The door clicked softly shut behind her, leaving her alone with the quiet morning and the sound of her own footsteps. For a moment, she just stood there on the small concrete step, listening. The faint buzz of distant traffic. A dog barking down the block. Wind threaded through the branches overhead, sending a flurry of pale, pink petals spinning to the ground around her shoes. First step, she murmured, and forced herself to move. Izumi paused at the corner, the familiar route to the station stretching out ahead of her like a well-worn track. Today it felt different, brighter somehow, sharper at the edges, as if the world itself had noticed her uniform and decided to pay attention. The street was already beginning to stir. Shop owners rolled up metal shutters with a clatter. The scent of fresh bread drifted from a nearby bakery, and cyclists wove past with the easy confidence of people who had somewhere to be and knew exactly how long it would take to get there. A delivery truck rumbled by, radio playing a pop song she vaguely recognized. Two office workers hurried past, arguing about deadlines. A stray cat lounged atop a vending machine, tail flicking lazily as it watched the morning unfold. Izumi adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, fingers briefly brushing the outline of the pamphlet and the faint crinkle of the photo tucked safely inside. The pack of tissues in her blazer pocket rustled as she moved, a quiet reminder of her mother's fussing. "Yue hai," she murmured under her breath, tasting the words like something fragile and dangerous. First day. The walk to the station was short enough that she'd memorized every crack in the sidewalk over the years. This one was near the lamppost that looked vaguely like a rabbit. That one by the convenience store where she and Izuku had once tripped at the same time and gone down in a graceless heap. Today, each step felt simultaneously too slow and too fast, like her body and mind couldn't agree on the proper speed to approach the future. A small group of middle schoolers passed her going the opposite direction, their chatter high and breathless. One of them, a boy with a hero-themed backpack twice the size of his torso, did a double take when he caught sight of her blazer. "Whoa, look! UA uniform," he hissed to his friends, not nearly as quiet as he thought. Izumi kept her gaze forward, but a faint heat crept up the back of her neck. "Do you think she's going to be on TV one day?" Another whispered. "Idiot. Not every UA student ends up famous." A third muttered, though there was a wobbly note of awe there too. Izumi's lips twitched. The comments stung and soothed at once. The idea of being seen, of being recognized, sat uncomfortably beside the old, familiar image of herself. Quirkless, powerless, staring up at a world that had never seemed meant for her. Not anymore. She descended the station stairs with the tide of commuters, the air cooling slightly as concrete swallowed the morning light. The steady rumble of incoming trains, the mechanical chime of announcements, and the buzz of conversation folded together into a white noise that wrapped around her. Buying a ticket, moving through the gate, finding her usual spot on the platform, it all happened on autopilot. Her body knew the routine. Her mind, however, was miles ahead, already at the massive gates of UA, already inside a classroom with faces she only half recognized from entrance rankings and whispered rumors. The platform filled quickly. A woman in a business suit scrolled through her phone beside Izumi, lips moving silently as she read. A little girl clung to her father's hand, an advertisement featuring a smiling hero in neon bright colors. A high school couple from another school stood close, their fingers almost but not quite touching. The train slid into the station with a rush of air and screech of brakes. Doors parted with a soft hiss. Izumi stepped inside, shifting to stand near the corner by the door close enough to exit quickly, far enough to avoid the crush in the center. She wrapped one hand around the overhead strap and let her gaze drift to the window. Her reflection faintly superimposed itself over the city striking by outside. Green hair pulled into a neat ponytail, uniform crisp and clean, pupils narrowing and widening as the train passed from light to shadow. For a brief second, she imagined what strangers might see if they looked at her now. Just another UA student on her way to school. Another hopeful face in a sea of them. They wouldn't see the hours of training, the quiet nights spent wondering if she'd already hit the ceiling of what she could be, the hollow ache of comparing herself to the heroes she idolized. They wouldn't see the girl who had once been told that some dreams simply weren't meant for people like her. She smiled faintly at her own reflection, the expression small but real. "Too late to back out," she murmured. The train rocked gently as it sped toward her stop. Station names blurred past. People got on, people got off, the world shifting and rearranging itself in small, ordinary ways around the fact that nothing about today felt ordinary to her. Scene change. By the time she reached the station nearest UA, the morning had fully bloomed. Students in various uniforms spilled out onto the streets, some walking alone, some clustered in chatty groups. Here and there, she caught glimpses of others in the same gray and blue blazer she wore, the UA crest gleaming faintly in the light. The air here felt different, charged, as if the city itself understood that within a few blocks lay one of the places that shaped its future. The academy itself rose ahead, partially visible over surrounding buildings even from this distance. The main tower's glass caught the sunlight and threw it back in sharp, clean lines, a gleaming spear of ambition stabbing at the sky. Izumi slowed for just a heartbeat at the first clear view of the campus. The real thing. She'd seen it in pamphlets, watched it from afar on television broadcasts, and memorized the arrangement of the main buildings from maps. None of that had prepared her for the way it felt to stand at the base of that reality. The scale of it, the history is baked into every line of glass and steel. Her fingers flexed at her sides, nails pressing faint crescents into her palms. "I'll do my best," she repeated under her breath. Saying it out here, with UA actually in front of her, made the promise feel anchored instead of hollow. She fell into step with the flow of students heading toward the main gate. A few glanced at her, some curious, some indifferent. Somewhere in the crowd, she thought she caught a flash of familiar white hair, but when she craned her neck to check, Whoever it was had already disappeared around a cluster of general studies students. "Izuka's probably already there," she muttered, a mixture of fondness and irritation threading through the words. "Of course he is." The main gate loomed above, its iron bars thrown open wide in welcome or challenge. Security cameras tracked the flow of arrivals with silent, unblinking attention. Pro-heroes patrolled discreetly at a distance, their presence more felt than seen, like invisible lines of defense woven into the air. As Izumi crossed the threshold, a faint shiver skated down her spine. It felt like stepping through an invisible barrier, from one version of her life into another. The courtyard opened up around her, a wide expanse of clean pavement, carefully maintained greenery, and towering glass. Students peeled off in different directions, following signs to their respective departments and classrooms. Some laughed too loudly. Some whispered names of famous pro-heroes rumored to be teaching this year. Others walked alone, heads down, carrying storms of their own. Izumi found herself walking more slowly, letting the atmosphere soak in. It smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass, steel, and something else, ozone, maybe, or the lingering traces of a dozen quirks used here every day. Somewhere nearby, an explosion sounded, a small, controlled one, followed by a distant shout and a teacher's sharp reprimand. "This is it," she told herself quietly. "No more one day. It's today." Ahead, the path curved gently toward the main building. And somewhere inside, beyond those walls and fluorescent lights and scuffed classroom floors, waited the next test, the next challenge, the next opportunity to prove she deserved every step that had led her here. She straightened her shoulders and continued forward, the quiet morning behind her and the storm of her future gathering, bright and relentless, just ahead. The doors of UA High beckoned, vast and daunting, yet dazzling with promise, even from miles away in her imagination. The grand entrance loomed ahead, a gateway to the life she had envisioned since she was a small child. Each step she took felt heavy with anticipation, but also light with the thrill of possibility. The path beneath her feet seemed to hum with energy, as if even the ground itself knew the significance of her journey. Her heart, brimming with hope and determination, beat in time with her steady stride. Izumi walked forward, her gaze fixed on the imposing structure before her. She was ready, nervous, yes, her stomach twisting into knots with every thought of what lay ahead, but ready nonetheless. This was her dream, the first step toward becoming the hero she aspired to be. The whispers of encouragement from her childhood echoed in her mind, a reminder of why she had come this far. Images flickered at the edge of her consciousness. Izuka tugging on her sleeve and babbling about hero stats. Her father's rare, quiet smiles when she pushed herself a little further. Her mother's hands wrapping bandages with a tenderness that never once suggested giving up. She clenched her fists, a small but reassuring gesture, and pushed open the doors to her future. Time skip. Inside the school, the hallways of UA High stretched out before her, a maze of excitement and uncertainty. Polished floors reflected the overhead lights. Walls lined with bulletin boards displayed club flyers, event notices, and framed photos of past classes frozen mid-victory. Somewhere, someone loudly. Somewhere else, someone sighed like the weight of the world had already found their shoulders. Izumi held her schedule tightly in her slightly trembling hands, her eyes scanning the paper for any clue that might lead her to Class 1A. The bustling chatter of other students filled the air, their energy infectious yet overwhelming. Her nerves were on edge, her palms slightly sweaty as she tried to focus. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she refused to let it crush her resolve. Left staircase. Third floor. End of the hall. The characters on the page swam for a second as anxiety tightened in her chest. She forced herself to inhale slowly, then exhale through her nose. One hallway at a time, one turn at a time. She couldn't help but wonder where her brother was. Izuku had always been her anchor, her unwavering support in moments like this. The one who'd walked beside her when people whispered. The one who had believed in her even when she'd failed to. She hoped to see his familiar face soon, to share in this monumental day together. Yue had been a shared dream for so long it felt strange to take any step here without him. As her thoughts swirled and threatened to spiral, a gentle tap on her shoulder pulled her back to reality. Startled, she turned around quickly, her wide eyes meeting the familiar white hair and kind blue eyes of her twin brother, Izuku. He stood there in his pristine Yue uniform, tied perfectly straight, blazer sitting just right on his shoulders. There was a calm steadiness in his expression, but she knew him well enough to see the faint tension in the way his fingers curled and uncurled at his sides. Still, his warm, reassuring smile instantly eased the tightness in her chest. "Izumi," Izuku said softly, his voice filled with the quiet confidence she had always admired. "You look like you could use some help." Relief flooded through her as she let out a small laugh, the corners of her lips curving into a smile. "You have no idea," she replied, holding up her schedule. "I was starting to think I'd be wandering these halls forever." Izuku chuckled, his laughter light and comforting. "Come on, I'll show you the way. Class 1A isn't too far from here." He stepped beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost brushed as they walked. The simple, familiar proximity settled something jittery inside her. "Did you sleep?" she asked quietly as they turned a corner. "A bit," he admitted. "Mom kept pacing outside my room. I think she was more nervous than we were." Izumi snorted. "She made me promise to call her if I meet anyone interesting. Whatever that means." "It means she's already preparing future embarrassing stories," Izuku said, deadpan. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of corridors, their shared determination and bond a quiet reminder that they were in this together. The future awaited, and Izumi was ready to face it head-on, or at least, she wasn't going to run away. They stopped in front of a door that towered over them, the bold black letters 1A stamped clearly across the plaque. Up close, it felt even more imposing. The handle seemed absurdly ordinary for something that might as well have been the lever to a whole new life. Izumi swallowed, fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "Kind of big," she muttered, staring up at the door. "Symbolic, maybe," Izuku replied lightly, though there was a faint tightness around his eyes that told her he felt it too. "Big doors for big dreams, right?" He shot her a sideways smile. It was an objectively awful line, but it pulled a small, breathless laugh from her anyway. "That's so corny." "You love it," he said, utterly unbothered. Izumi drew in a slow breath, feeling her heart drum against her ribs. This was different from the exam. There everything had been chaos and instinct. Here, the future felt deliberate, structured, real. Every step from this point on would be watched, measured, judged not by machines, but by people who decided whether she belonged. "Ready?" Izuku asked. She nodded before she could second-guess herself. "Yeah, let's go." Izuku slid the door open with a smooth, practiced motion. A rush of voices spilled out instantly: laughter, idle chatter, the scrape of chairs against the floor. The room was bright, rows of desks neatly arranged, sunlight pooling across the polished surfaces. Faces turned as the two of them stepped inside, some curious, some indifferent, some sizing them up with the kind of quick, assessing glance only other aspiring heroes could manage. Izumi felt every one of those looks like a physical weight. "Whoa, there are two of them," someone whispered from the back. "Are they twins? I heard they crushed the entrance exam. Which one scored higher?" The murmurs pricked at her nerves. Izumi kept her eyes forward, the way she'd practiced in the mirror. Neutral expression, shoulders relaxed, steps even. "Don't shrink. Don't cower. You're supposed to be here." "Oh, hey, it's you two." A familiar, enthusiastic voice called out. Izumi blinked as a pink-skinned girl with short, messy horns and bright golden eyes leaned halfway over her desk, waving with both hands. "You made it. I mean, of course you made it, duh, but still." "Hi again." Mina Ashido grinned, her energy seemingly endless. Memories surfaced: Ashido flashing a thumbs up at the testing grounds, her laughter cutting through the tension right before the robots descended. Beside her, a dark-haired girl with a reserved posture and sharp eyes offered a polite nod. "Good morning. I'm Yaoyorosa Momo." Her tone was composed, but there was a genuine warmth beneath the formality. "Gee, good morning," Izumi replied, bowing her head slightly. She hadn't expected to recognize anyone this soon, and the tiny spark of familiarity eased some of the tension winding through her. "You should introduce yourselves properly," Izuka murmured toward her, voice low enough that only she could hear. "First impressions and all that." She sucked in a quick breath. "Right. First impressions. I'm Yagi Izumi," she said, pitching her voice just loud enough to carry without sounding like she was shouting. "I look forward to working with everyone." The words felt stiff, but they came out steady. "Progress." Izuku followed smoothly. "Gojo Izuku. Please take care of us." He bowed neatly, posture practiced. A bespectacled boy with neatly parted dark hair shot to his feet, so fast his chair nearly toppled. That was very proper. He adjusted his glasses with a clipped motion, eyes shining. "I am Ida Tenya from the Semi-Private Academy. It is an honor to meet such diligent students on the first day." Izumi startled slightly at the intense radiating off him. Izuku only offered a friendly nod, as if this level of enthusiasm were perfectly normal. "You two scored really high, didn't you?" Another voice chimed in, this one more relaxed. Izumi turned to see a boy with messy red hair and sharp teeth grinning at them. "Name's Kirishima Ijiro. Let's all be manly heroes together." "Manly," Izumi echoed under her breath, not entirely sure how to respond to that. But Kirishima's grin was so earnest that she found herself nodding anyway. More classmates trickled in, some loud, some quiet, some so nervous they could barely look up from their desks. A boy with black hair covering one eye lurked near the back, trying very clearly to avoid attention. A short, round boy clutched his bag like a lifeline. A girl with earphone jacks for earlobes leaned against her desk, expression flat, listening to everything. The room's atmosphere thickened with a strange, exhilarating mixture of tension and possibility. Izumi listened to the overlapping conversations, trying to map names to faces, quirks to personalities. This wasn't just a crowd. These were her future allies, rivals, maybe even friends. Izuka nudged her toward a pair of empty desks near the middle of the room. "Let's sit here," he suggested. "Good view of the board, close enough to the front that we won't be tempted to slack off." "You say that like I ever slack off," Izumi muttered, but she dropped into the seat anyway. The chair was familiar in shape, but foreign in significance. She'd sat in 100 classrooms in her life, but never in one where becoming a hero was the stated objective instead of the whispered dream. Her fingers traced the smooth edge of the desk, grounding herself. A flicker of movement in her peripheral vision drew her attention. Just at the edge of what she could easily see, a figure sat, radiating an unsettling intensity. It was a boy, his blonde hair a stark, explosive mess of spikes, and his most striking feature, eyes the color of deep crimson, narrowed and sharp. He was slouched back in his chair, adopting a posture of nonchalant defiance, though the effect was anything but relaxed. His arms were folded tightly across his chest, a barrier erected against the world, and his face was set in a rigid, unyielding scowl. His expression was unreadable to others, but it seemed harsh, as if etched in stone. The atmosphere surrounding him felt thick, almost vibrating with a barely leashed fury. It was palpable, a tangible thing that hung heavy in the air around him. She knew that contained energy, that simmering anger. It was almost audible, like the buzzing of a high-voltage wire. It was him, unmistakable. Kakin. She registered silently, the name forming in her mind. For a brief, foolish moment, their childhood flashed in front of her. Muddy shoes and scraped knees, firecracker tempers and daring contests, the way he used to look at the sky like it had insulted him personally. The way his eyes had changed the day her life had diverged from what everyone said it should be. His gaze slid over the room briefly, disinterested, then skipped right past her. Her heart stuttered, not sure if it hurt more that he hadn't glared at her or that he hadn't acknowledged her at all. "Don't worry about him," Izuka murmured under his breath, as if he'd noticed who she'd been watching. "Just focus on yourself." "I'm not worried," she lied. Before Izuku could respond, a low, tired voice cut through the chatter like a dull knife. "If you're here to socialize, you've picked the wrong career path." The entire room fell silent. A man in a long, dark capture weapon scarf stood at the front of the classroom, half slouched as if merely existing here was a mild inconvenience. His hair was unkempt, black waves falling around a face that looked like it hadn't seen proper sleep in days. A yellow sleeping bag lay discarded near the door like evidence of a crime. Izumi's breath caught. Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead. She'd watched his few available interviews, scoured outdated footage, and examined every article she could find. An underground hero, efficient and ruthless in his pragmatism. Someone who didn't care about flashing smiles or crowd-pleasing poses, only results. Seeing him in person was like having a myth step off the page and yawn in front of her. Took you all. Aizawa checked his watch with a flat expression. Less than 8 seconds to quiet down. Better than the average first class. His gaze swept the room, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. Not good enough, though. Sit down. The few students still standing scrambled into their seats. He picked up a piece of chalk, dragging it across the board with a scraping sound that made a few people flinch. I am Aizawa Shota, your homeroom teacher, he said simply. No flourish. No grand declarations. Just a fact. Get changed. We're going outside. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Outside? Someone repeated. But we haven't even had orientation yet, Ida began, half rising from his seat. If you're here to follow some neat little script, transfer schools, Aizawa cut in, not even looking at him. He pulled a small device from his pocket and tapped it once. You have 10 minutes to change into your gym uniforms and get to ground beta. If you're late, don't bother coming back. A chill skated down Izumi's spine. Harsh as the words were, there was no malice in his tone, just a blunt practicality that made them land even harder. A quirk apprehension test, she realized almost immediately, or something close to it, a way to see who they really were beyond test scores and written answers. Aizawa's gaze flicked over the class again, and for a heartbeat, his eyes met hers. The air around her seemed to thin. She straightened instinctively, as if his stare alone demanded it. Then he looked away, already walking toward the door, capture weapon dragging lazily behind him like the tail of some bored but dangerous animal. The room erupted into frantic motion. Gym uniforms, right? Izuku said quickly, already rising to his feet. We saw the lockers on the way in. On the left near the stairwell, Izumi added automatically. Her brain, grateful for something concrete to latch onto, shifted into task mode. We should hurry. 8 minutes if we don't want to risk it. Right. He flashed her a small, tight smile. Racy there? She snorted despite herself. In the hall. On the first day, Ida will have a heart attack. Then we'll just walk briskly, Izuku amended, eyes glinting. They joined the stream of students funneling into the hall, the sheer number of bodies and voices enough to make Izumi's head spin. Snatches of conversation passed her, someone worrying about their mobility, someone else muttering about showcasing their quirk, a third grumbling about having wanted a quiet first period. But with every step, another layer of disbelief peeled away. She was here, in UA, in Class 1A, with a homeroom teacher who could expel her on a whim, classmates whose names would one day be known across Japan, and a future that felt less like a distant dream and more like a storm gathering just ahead. In the changing room, Izumi opened her locker with slightly unsteady hands. The scent of new fabric and detergent filled the narrow space. Her gym uniform sat neatly folded inside, the deep blue accented by white stripes, the bold UA printed across the chest like a declaration. She brushed her fingers over the letters once, letting their texture ground her. As she pulled the uniform on, adjusting the fit around her shoulders and making sure the hem sat just right, she caught her reflection in the small mirror mounted inside the locker door. Green hair pulled back, sharp, reptilian eyes steady, jaw set. She looked different from the girl who had woken up in her small bedroom that morning. Not because her features had changed, but because of the way she held herself. Straighter, more contained, like someone bracing for impact and refusing to flinch. You worked for this, she whispered to the girl in the mirror, echoing her mother's words. So prove it. Her heart was still racing, but now it wasn't just from fear. There was something else tangled in the pounding rhythm. Anticipation. Resolve. A flicker of something fierce and hungry that had always lived in her chest, but had never been given space to breathe. Beside her, Izuku shut his own locker with a quiet click. "Ready?" She nodded. "As I'll ever be." By the time she and Izuku emerged on a ground beta, the morning sun had climbed higher, bathing the training field in a clear, unflinching light. Concrete blocks, mock city structures, and metal frameworks rose around them like the skeleton of a half-finished world. Aizawa stood waiting, hands in his pockets, capture weapon trailing lazily at his feet. His expression hadn't changed. If anything, he looked even more unimpressed now that they were in clothes meant for action. Around them, her new classmates gathered one by one, blue and white uniforms stark against the concrete and steel. Some stretched experimentally, some fidgeted, some tried to look unfazed and failed spectacularly. Izumi flexed her fingers, feeling the familiar tingle slide through her limbs as she subtly engaged her quirk, just enough to remind herself it was there. First day of UA High. First test. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of dust and metal across the field. Whatever Aizawa had planned, whatever line he intended to draw between those who would stay and those who would be sent home, she intended to be on the right side of it. So, this was the end of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next